No.
Call this meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please be seated. And remember to silence your cell phones if you have them. First item on the agenda is citizen concerns for anything not already listed on the agenda. Are there any citizen concerns? Hearing none. Item 2 is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Items 3 through 5 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3 is approval of the minutes of the January 3rd meeting and approval of the minutes of the January 5th meeting. Item 4 is approval of the claims. Item 5 from Human Resources includes A, approval of the memorandum of personnel transactions, B, authorization to initiate the hiring process, and C, approval of the casualty policy with Princeton Excess and Surplus Lines Insurance Company. Anything noteworthy on that, Melissa, or pretty standard renewal?
Same coverage as last year, as far as liability.
Thank you. Same coverage, little cost increase. Any questions on the consent agenda?
I'd move the consent agenda, Mr. Chair.
Second the motion by Taylor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 6 from the Siouxland Coalition Against Human Trafficking, Bernadette Rixner. This was postponed from last week. This is action to approve and then present the proclamation naming the month of January Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Welcome. Is there anything you'd like to say, or may I read the proclamation?
Read the proclamation, please, first.
Whereas the United States was founded upon the principle that all people are created with the inalienable right to freedom, and added the 13th Amendment to the Constitution making slavery illegal. And whereas slavery within the United States today is most often found in the form of forced labor and sex trafficking, which weakens our social fabric, increases violence and organized crime, and debases our humanity. And whereas this problem is found even within our own community. And whereas every business, community organization, faith community, family, and individual can make a difference by choosing products that are not made by forced labor, by working to protect our young people from sexual exploitation, and by addressing the problems of internet sex trafficking and pornography, and by becoming more aware of the problem and possible solutions. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim the month of January 2023 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month in Woodbury County, Iowa, and urge all citizens to become more familiar with the problem and to work towards solutions. Signed by the four of us.
Thank you. My name is Bernadette Rixner.
I'm Christine Nathaniel, representing SCAT and Her Health Women's Center.
And Stacy Hale with Her Health Women's Center.
And we want to thank you. We've done this for a number of years. And in listening to the proclamation, we still really do believe that each individual, each business, each agency can make a difference. And so we want to re-emphasize that we're here. We're happy to be a resource for the community. We are happy to do presentations. We are part of the Iowa Secretary of State's Iowa Businesses Against Trafficking. And so we just have a whole lot that we're willing to offer. I will make sure that there are some brochures that are available to people so that you have our contact information. Otherwise, you can Google Siouxland Coalition Against Human Trafficking. And we just really, we're happy to be part of this community. We want to be a real resource for it. We thank you for doing this.
Thank you for taking the time. Any other comments on this item?
We're happy.
I'll move approval.
I'll second the motion by Radig. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you again. Item 7 from Community and Economic Development, Director Daniel Priestley for action is consideration of applicants and appointment of member of the board to the Board of Adjustment for the new 5-year term, 2023 to 2027. Mr. Priestley?
Good afternoon, Supervisors. This is a follow-up from last week for the two candidates for the term of 2023 to 2027 to serve on the Board of Adjustment.
Great summary.
Yeah.
At this point, it's not required, but I didn't want either of you that made the trip out here to feel slighted. So if you had anything you wanted to add that wasn't already disclosed to the board or any experience you wanted to highlight, please feel free to come up. All right. Well, thank you again for coming again. It's nice to have a couple options to choose from. I think you'll both serve in the community, obviously one way or the other. Is there any board member comment on the applicants? I'll just say it was, it's a difficult decision. There's a couple people that are well-intentioned and well-experienced. I don't really want anything, I say to be, plus this, minus that, so to speak. But I think that the board has seen some recent involvement from Mr. Turner and has been instrumental in being involved in the community decisions, and particularly controversial ones which impact us and make our job easier when we can deflect some of that community involvement to those in our community willing to step up. And so I want to make clear that I'd be happy with either applicant, but in the absence of any board comment, I'd make a motion to appoint Mr. Doyle Turner.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay?
And I'm going to reiterate almost the same thing. I think early on, Doyle had asked me if I'd be supportive, and seeing the interaction, especially during the wind ordinance and the level of involvement, not just here, but outside of that. I know Jeff and would be excellent as well. So almost unfortunate that we don't have two different openings, but it's really not anything otherwise than just having had some more interaction over the last 6 to 8 months with Mr. Turner in that regard. But I really do hope that planning and zoning, if that comes open, I think you'd be an incredible asset. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I'd agree. There's always openings, and hope that you remain interested. Any other board member comments?
Hey, there's always commission to assess damages.
I got commitments. We're good.
Okay.
Okay. Hearing no other motions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Item number 8 from the Board of Supervisors includes several items from myself for action. The first item A is annual process we do is approval of the 2023 liaison assignments. Obviously, we have 4 board members, so the assignments are spread out accordingly. Nothing really to note on the changes of titles, except Mr. Radig, you mentioned that one of them, we changed it to the Workforce Committee, it goes by an updated name now, but Western Iowa Workforce Development. Other than that, no changes, and I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Of course, we will revise this as soon as possible after a 5th supervisor is seated. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item B is approval of committee form for Health and Wellness Committee. Mr. Bittinger, for your information, this is a form by the board bylaws that we use to transparently state for the record the members of and the purpose of each special purpose committee that's not required by code 28E or intergovernmental agreement, so that if someone asks who's on this committee, we don't argue about who's on the committee, it's on paper. So for the special purpose committees, we have 3 of these that were previously approved in the liaison assignments, and this is just effectuating the other members of these committees apart from the board members. So any questions on the Health and Wellness Committee?
None, I'd move approval.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. The purpose is to update and share information to stakeholders on the finances and functions of the health insurance fund and other benefit plans, and to work towards improved wellness services that improve lives while responsibly controlling costs. The committee meets as needed. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item C is approval of committee form for Woodbury County Courthouse Advisory Committee for Historical Preservation. This one's been instrumental leading up to the 100th anniversary of the courthouse and any maintenance issues that come up kind of sporadically, whether there's discussion needed. Updated the list on this as well. The purpose is interpreting and balancing between the beauty of the past with the function of the present.
I'll move it.
Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Taylor. Hearing no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item D is approval of the committee form for the Policy Review Committee. This purpose is to receive, consider, and recommend to the Board of Supervisors policy changes as requested by county officials and the public. Meets as needed. Updated the members again. This may not meet for several months and may meet several times in a year, depending on how often policy changes are requested or reviewed or updated.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item E is approval of resolution reappointing Rocky DeWitt to the LAC Authority following his resignation from the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors. This resolution again was passed by Joshua Woodman, have not noted any issues with it. It does, to one of your questions last week, remove the section about being a member of the Board of Supervisors and simply retains the same term that Mr. DeWitt is currently, or was currently on. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Taylor.
I have just one. Are we approving the resolution appointing Mr. DeWitt? And I noticed that he's referenced in the resolution itself. Is that what's necessary to do?
Yes, that was the practice of the previous resolution.
So because he's named, we don't have to do 2 different motions, one appointing him and a second appointing a different resolution?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the resolution appoints him.
Okay. So with that being said, I'd move to approve the resolution appointing Commissioner to Woodbury County Law Enforcement Center Authorities Board of Commissioners.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. My last item here is fairly lengthy. Item F, approval of the rules for public participation in the Board of Supervisors meeting. Bear with me, as these rules have not been formally approved perhaps in the last 8 years, or at least changed. Maybe they've been approved 1 or 2 years in the 8 years, but as our membership changes, it's helpful to fall back on the fact that we've approved the rules that we apply to those participating in the meetings, similar to our bylaws. Just to start off, the main difference you'll notice, and my impetus for bringing this item forward, was to consolidate the citizen concerns items. I'll just read from the summary. For the last 8 years, the board has gone far and above and beyond by providing 2 separate items on each agenda for citizen concerns. For contrast, the Sioux City Council provides only 1 at the end, and the Sergeant Bluff City Council provides only 1 at the beginning. I know Rolling Hills community, the region only gives 1 at the beginning as well. The Sioux City School Board provides only one at the beginning with the added restriction of a policy that requires speakers submit a form before the meeting in which they wish to speak. Orderly, respectful, and productive public comment will not be restricted by these changes, as every effort will be made to encourage participation through more organized and more transparent agenda items. If a citizen is unwilling to either take the time to submit an agenda item for consideration or sit through items of official business to speak at the end of the meeting, then that is their choice. My goal here is to bring citizen concerns to this board on actionable items and to consolidate those. Ideally, we would have an agenda item for something of substance with backup material so people aren't handing us photos over the counter and we're receiving one at a time and wasting time doing that. If it's an issue that's important enough to bring to this board and if we can act on it, then I think that's reasonable. I don't like the sort of gotcha moments that have happened to this board or through this board over the years that I've witnessed in my 8 years watching this play out. I think that we are tempted to engage in arguments and deliberation that is out of order with the speakers simply because there is a chance for them to speak at the beginning and our chance is to speak at the end. And who sits through an entire Woodbury County Board meeting? Not very many people unless you're department heads or you have something on the agenda. So I think that is something that needs to change. I think we've let this play out for several years, and I think so. Again, that's the major change. But as I was looking through this, I saw that the board should approve these changes, and I think we should update the rules as well. So I'm going to go through these rules, and I'm just going to segment it out. So if you guys have any thoughts, please let me know as we go through each of the rules. Start off by saying, our intent of these rules is to facilitate as much public participation as possible in an orderly fashion. So there's no legal right to be heard at a board meeting, but there are certainly, our principles would dictate we would allow as much discussion as we can receive in an orderly fashion. First rule, and these are printed on, these aren't my rules that came out of nowhere. These are currently in some form printed on the beginning of every agenda for the last 8 years. So I'm not presenting new rules, I'm simply updating and tweaking some things. Rule 1 is please silence cell phones and other devices while in the boardroom. No issues with that. Rule 2 is the chair may recognize speakers on agenda items after initial discussion by the board. I think this is helpful for board members in the community to know that I do want the board members to have a chance to weigh in on agenda items before we open it up. I don't want them to feel like because someone approached the microphone, we're cut off and there's going to be an argument between two people and the rest of the board members may have a question that would preclude some of the arguments. Third rule is speakers will approach the microphone one at a time and give their name and address before their statement. That's current, I just consolidated it into one line. Rule, and this is not as stringent as other governments that require more information. This is for the minutes, of course. Item 4 is speakers will limit their remarks to 3 minutes on any one item, which is the same, and address their remarks to the board. I thought that was helpful to put in because sometimes we'll have people come up with a dispute that's not with the board, and they'll turn around and they'll face someone else in the gallery and say, is it true that you did this? You said this, right? And it just kind of creates this argument that we're watching, and that's why Robert's Rules of Order with us as board members say, address all your remarks to the chair. There's a central point. There's a central, floodgate of different, orders of discussion, and there's not this stuff going on in the gallery. So I think that's important, and the remarks should be made to the board, not necessarily just to me, but it should be an address to the board that we can have a effect on. Item 5 is at the beginning of discussion on any item, the chair may request statements in favor of an action be heard first, followed by statements in opposition to the action. That was already there. And then I added, the chair may also request delegates provide statements on behalf of multiple speakers. If we have 100 people here and 50% are for one side and 50% for the other, as we've had before, that's just what the board's done. That's not new, I'm just putting it in writing. We've had chairmen of the board say, okay, if you're of the same opinion, raise your hand, or come up and let us know if you're with that opinion, or can we, truncate this by just, understanding where everyone's at. If you have new information, please come forward, but if not, it's been stated before, and I think everyone appreciates that. And again, that's past practice. Item 6, any concerns or questions which do not relate to a scheduled item on the agenda will be heard under the item. So all these items before were about agenda items already on the agenda. This one is about citizen concerns. Any concerns or questions which do not relate to a scheduled item on the agenda will be heard under the item citizen concerns. Please note the board is legally prohibited from taking action on or engaging in deliberation on concerns not listed on the agenda, and in such cases, the chair will request further discussion take place after properly noticed. This is for fundamentally transparency reasons. We respect transparency. When people come to the board, I think we need to demand the same accountability of the concerned citizens. That, in order to get the biggest platform for your concern, you should want to have an agenda item that's more substantive and brought forward with backup material the board can review. And if that's not the case, then it's not because we don't want to talk to you. If the auditor, as our parliamentarian says, be cautious, or even our county attorney has done that in the past, says be cautious, you can't speak and deliberate and make a decision right now. This has to come back to the board. So if it has to come to the board, bring it to the board in an agenda item where it should be. If it's determined it needs to come back as an agenda item, don't be surprised if we say, please bring it back as an agenda item. Obviously, if there's simple yes/no answers or simple questions, we can direct you to the right department head, and we do that all the time. But we do get interrupted by both ends of the table, parliamentary and legal, on engaging in basically agenda item discussion when it's not noticed. So we want these concerns to be properly noticed. If you're asking for the board for a specific action, that makes it clear to everyone what you want. Thoughts on that?
Thank you for that clarification, because sometimes I feel like the bad guy. And
Right.
I think it's important that citizens understand what you just explained about deliberation. Is as soon as you start having that back and forth, that's deliberation. And if there's another party that's involved that isn't here participating in that, they are not, it's just not fair. So thank you. I appreciate that you're clarifying that.
Certainly. And that's not just in regards to agenda item requests. That's simply one of the reasons why I'd like to consolidate citizen concerns to one opportunity. And if it's at the beginning or the end is not so much a concern to me. I think it makes more sense at the end. But again, just to disincentivize that sort of argument style. The point of citizen concerns is to bring your concerns to the board, not to engage in a gotcha argument or say, I pulled this out of my pocket, you haven't seen it before, what do you think of this? You can call your own press conference if you want to do that. For the board, we have to act on items of business, and so we do that. And so, please know that change is simply to make sure the concerns are handled in an orderly fashion and you're directed to the right place. And to disincentivize us from getting involved and getting in bitter arguments and pulling other people in from the gallery, and all these things can be properly noticed and orderly and discussed in an orderly fashion. And then item 7 is a technological update. We have increased capability for members of the board to call in, which is unaffected by any of these rules. As long as it's impossible or impractical, members of the board can always call in or conference in according to the bylaws. This is in regards to public comment. This says public comment by electronic or telephonic means is prohibited except when directed by a majority of the board for a particular agenda item of a subsequent meeting. Previously, this was never addressed, so that's a gray area. If someone calls in to a number that is automatically answered or just tapped and answered, what oversight does the board have as, as the presiding officer? How, do I tell someone to cut them off if they swear. You know, people have sworn at our meetings before, and these things are broadcast live. And not only that, but you have consideration of not everyone is very adept at using the mute button. They may be calling in, and they have called in when they're on the highway, the windows are down, they're losing coverage, and we're just here like, what did you say? And one of us heard it, so then we repeat it, and it's just really clumsy. And if we're not gonna apply standards that, you know, we can't force someone to be in a good cell reception area and use the mute button because we're not there. So, but I don't wanna completely say you can't call in. So that's why it's except when directed by a majority of the board for a particular agenda item of a subsequent meeting.
You may want to amend that to say the chair or a majority of the board, because a lot of times when the agenda is getting set up, it's set up by the chair. And if you were putting an item on and it was maybe an update from Goldberg Group or something, and he was calling in from Kansas, you know, you wouldn't want to have to get approval from 2 other supervisors to throw it on there. So I think it should be chair or majority of the board.
That's fine. I guess, are you talking about like an item on that day?
Well, it says, you were saying as a rule, unless by a majority of the board or, you know, to call in. And I think the instances where we're going to use, you know, somebody as a citizen calling in, it's going to be when it's the need for an expert reference or, you know, some kind of a professional opinion, whether it be like an engineering firm or accounting firm or whatever.
I'd be comfortable by saying for having the chair or the majority. Right. I think that makes sense.
Okay. I can add that. I just wanted to point out it also says for a subsequent meeting, so my intent was if we know someone's going to be on the road, we're going to know that a week ahead, and we're going to be able to have IT plan for how they interact with us. If it's an expert, you know, the board should probably signal that the week ahead. But I can see situations if we didn't know someone from Goldberg was going to be out of town and they're out of town that week, suddenly then the chair can authorize that for that meeting. What I wanted to avoid though was just appeals to the chair to, you know, say, well, you let this person call in because they randomly decided not to come to the courthouse. So now you have to allow this person, and now you have to allow everybody. That's why I had that set up as a subsequent meeting. But I mean, that can be amended. We can say majority of the board or a chair. For a subsequent meeting, I think it still makes sense. So in practice, again, this would be like if, you know, just like our bylaws say, if a majority of the board wants an action item on the agenda, it shall be put on the agenda of the subsequent meeting. There's no action needed. There's no agenda item needed for this. We can say at the subsequent meeting, are we all okay, or am I okay with a call in for an agenda item next week? And my thought process is, rather than approving it for one person or an expert, you know, we would just say, these are the rules for agenda item 13 next week. You know, we're going to have call-ins from experts. We may or may not accept call-ins from the public. But in the case of extraordinary items, obviously if there's, you know, let's say the windmill thing was happening right now. We had a lot of input from the phone. That would be a situation where I think the board would, or I would suggest that for that item, we allow call-ins. People that have, you know, perspectives from outside of our community, you know, should have a chance to weigh in and provide some unique information. But just generally, I don't want that to be the expectation, and I don't want people to just say, oh, the board's having a meeting, I'm going to call in and complain about something that they can't handle. Is that fair to everybody? Mm-hmm. Is that fair from the parliamentary perspective? And it makes your job easier in IT over there because you'll know, hopefully a week in advance, how to set things up. Otherwise, if you haven't been informed, don't anticipate any citizen call-ins. Any comments on the rules as proposed and amended with or the chair added in item number 7.
So do we have a legal definition of deliberation that we're gonna adopt?
I'll defer.
We've had this discussion on many occasions, but we always try to, in discussions with the county attorney's office, is to make sure that we're broadly looking at that issue, because deliberation, as soon as you start to, I'll give you an example of what occurred here not too long ago. A person asked a department head to come forward on an agenda an item that was not on the agenda, to talk about giving direction to that person. As soon as you start discussing those issues, you're forming an opinion. You're starting to form that opinion, and that is deliberation. So that has been my take on it, and I think that we've been in agreement with the county attorney's office on that, is that whenever you're talking about when you're not on an agenda item, it's just the best practice, and I've seen a lot of other governmental bodies do the same thing, is you just don't respond in those situations. You let the citizen make their whatever they want to talk about, and then if you want to continue that, it goes on the agenda at a subsequent meeting. But it's when those type of things that occur is when you get into areas that you can get into trouble with.
The reason I bring it up is because, you know, in board concerns, you could technically claim that just discussing is deliberation if you bring up anything at board concerns. So I think it would be helpful if we did have a definition of deliberation in here, whether it comes from the attorney's office or from Iowa code. But typically, I would think it's discussion with evidence to reach a verdict, conclusion, or action, not just discussion for discussion's sake. So it would be helpful to have a legal definition on here, because if they're gonna be our rules, they should be spelled out.
I think the attorney's office can probably provide us with a summary of what that means in this abbreviated list on each agenda.
He is writing down notes next to me. I don't know if he's deliberating.
Deliberation is, certainly if we have the thought this could have been an agenda item, it's probably best to be an agenda item. But if it's something that is just a confusion that's being cleared up, or a question or a concern that's being addressed or redirected, then all of that is just kind of fact-finding. Mr. Taylor?
I feel comfortable moving to approve the rules for public participation in Board of Supervisors meetings. I commend you for putting a finer point on some things and improving the publicly stated rules.
Thank you.
Do you want to have the amendment to say chair first, or do you want to?
I'd include that.
Okay.
Yeah,
then
or
we can
chair after
subsequently-
board majority or chair is what it will say.
Then I will second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Want to return to the comment Mr. Gill made about, not responding. Certainly some governments, that have more stringent rules, like the school district on screening citizen concerns, also have, rules for the board members on, we shall not respond. I think that's a little bit over the top when there's people that, may show up for the first time and simply not know, the answer to the question. They, have a earnest concern that hasn't been brought up as a sort of gotcha moment, several times. So, we'll treat those people, of course, with the deference and understanding there. But, as far as responding, because we are a large county and we have considerable media presence compared to other counties in Iowa, and we obviously are no stranger to criticism. This is not meant to stop that. I want to be very clear about that. I just want to be clear about the orderly discussion points of the board. And so if a citizen concern were to bring up a board concern, I think that's one argument for having citizen concerns at the end, which would be my intention going forward, because let the citizen concerns speak, let them play out, give them their 3 minutes uninterrupted, hear what they have to say. They can't accuse anyone of interrupting them. We have no incentive to interrupt them because we're not waiting an entire agenda to get to say our piece. Let them say their piece. And you know, for example, if Maria Runquist wants to come back and accuse Dan Bittinger again of failing to pay property taxes in another state, and it's not even him, let that play out, and then under board concerns, he can respond in an orderly fashion without having the, well, now he's responded, so now she's back up, and now, no. We have citizen concerns, it's noticed on the agenda. If you have an item, you will come and give that concern. It's not going to give birth to another concern and another concern and another concern until we're not able to adjourn because there's so much arguing going on. This is going to be set up to give everyone a chance to say their piece, citizens, and then the board. If the board wants to respond to some personal criticism that people have every right to levy, then they have every right to respond also uninterrupted. Is that fair? You're smirking.
Levy, no pun intended. Go on.
Yes, well, it's budget season. Sorry. Okay, well, being as this is a item on public rules, I'd be remiss if I did not open it up to the public and ask if there's any public comment on these rules as presented. Yeah, all right. Any other board discussion? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. And Karen, go ahead and copy these rules onto the next agenda and with the change of, or the chair on number 7. Very good. And next item is number 9 from Board of Supervisors, Keith Radig. Includes A and B for action. A is approved to separate consideration of Board of Supervisors pay from other elected officials. Please give your opening comment and then let's let each board member go down the line and until we've all had a chance to address this.
Just a continuation of what was done last year. I feel we have an incredibly difficult budget year again, and we don't really have the numbers or figures yet, but we have a deadline to have it so many days in advance, so, and just moving with last year's actions, I think we should do this again.
I apologize. Would you mind making a motion to discuss?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any other discussion for Mr. Radig to start? Okay. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Bittinger.
I'd be supportive of this as well. It'll save, right now, I believe that we have Dennis is at 3%. That's just plugged in or programmed in. So whether it's that or something higher from the compensation board, that's $13,432. I believe that Iowa code clearly allows us to do this. That was affirmed by last year's certification of the budget and our county attorney. So I believe it's something that as we ask our department heads and others to tighten their belts, that I think makes good sense.
Mr. Bittinger.
Yeah, no, with this, I agree that it's tight years and that you must, we need to watch our budgets and that. I don't know if approving this right now, if this is the correct action. Do we need to see what the comp boards say, whether or not, whatever they say doesn't mean we still won't take a 0% increase. I just don't know. I know we have 30 days, Supervisor Taylor, what you said, to submit this. I still think we have some time to still submit this. But I think there's still some more deliberation in the budget we could look at, and just to make sure it's more of a procedure order maybe for me, timely order. But I still maybe would like to consider, see what, is it 1%, 0%, see what's, see what we can do or not, do nothing at all. I don't know.
Anything else?
No, it's.
Okay.
We can-
I'll give
I
comment.
just wanted to say too that, we can make this action and always change the action at a later date. It's
Yes.
just to, be ahead of the game as far as the timeline, so we have this done legally.
Mr. Bittinger brings up a point I agree with. Last year when this was brought forward by Mr. Taylor, The comp board had met fairly early on in the process, and Dennis had already put in figures, which were the recommendations of the comp board, as he's required to do when they furnish their recommendations according to the code. This year, the comp board has not met. I don't know the exact date, but I know it's not in the next day or two. They still have yet to meet. So this action seems premature to me. Additionally, I want to address the penciling in of wages in the budget book. Past practice has been the board and/or the chair will direct the budget director to plug in a number for wage plan before that's decided, simply so we have a more realistic picture of the budget. And also, typically that carries over to the elected officials because, you know, they have some cost as well, and it's usually the same percentage. It's kind of, you know, it's an item where it's kind of a baseline guess, and it's no guarantee the board will approve that for wage plan or for elected officials, but nevertheless, we put it in, and it's not acted upon yet, so it's a placeholder. Just like every other thing we do to the budget, we remove $10,000 from electricity costs. That's a change that's made next week just by direction to the budget director. But it was not a board vote that decided, you know, that the current 3% would be within the budget. That was just me telling Dennis at the beginning of the process, you know, put in, I don't know, this number. And past chairmen have done that, and that's the way we've always operated. I think that makes sense for wage plan because there's only ever one percentage that's approved. I don't think it makes sense for elected officials now or going forward simply because it's not a realistic number. When we say we're saving off of 3%, that may not be true. The likelihood of all the recommendations being the same percentage are very slim. I don't know if it's ever happened. And if we say things like that as a board, we're only, you know, discussing our own position. We're not, you know, for instance, last year, I believe, Dennis, you told me that the vote of the board was over 100,000 plus more than what we quote unquote plugged in as a placeholder. So the comments about saving for the supervisors is kind of just obviously one side of the coin. The board may go above and beyond that, and the placeholder really has very limited usefulness, in my opinion, going forward because it is not something that's realistic. It's you know, again, there are several different options approved. So going forward, I've told Dennis that I'd like to see it reflected next week in the budget books, that until we have a comp board recommendation, there will be no wages plugged in for elected officials or deputies. And so we'll have a good baseline figure. You know, no matter what side of this argument the board's on, I hope they appreciate that, you know, we will only see what the recommendation is, and we will not have a sort of a vague thing that's out there and results in, you know, things like we save this amount of money by taking this action when that's not guaranteed across all the elected officials. And I also just have a question for Mr. Radig, I suppose. Do you plan to evenly apply this to all elected officials because it is as it always is, a tough budget year?
Well, I was starting with ourselves, like we did last year. I think it's important to see where we're at, you know, to make those decisions, but you have to have this done 30 days in advance. So we either do it now or we don't do it.
I agree with that. I think if we don't do it and break off and separate, we're going to be beholden to a certain percentage. And last year, the comp board recommendation was 22%, second highest for supervisors. And so if this board last year had said we're going to reduce by, let's just say, I'm using round numbers, 50%, then we would have de facto given ourselves an 11% increase. And there's no way to do that other than to do it on an exact sliding scale by the same percentage reduction from the comp board. So I agree. I think we either do it, especially since the comp board hasn't met and we don't know when they're going to. I think we either take the action or we don't, and I'm in agreement that it's time to separate.
I mean, I'll harken back to last year again. I mean, how many votes did we have on the elected official pay? And I think if you throw our pay in there, it's only gonna complicate matters even worse. So it just makes sense to remove ourselves from it.
And I completely appreciate that right now, based on the placeholder, it's, let's say 3% would be 13,432, but the comp board could recommend 9% for us. And so then it would be $39,000, $40,000 that we're saving taxpayers. And I know it doesn't sound, people say, well, in the grand scheme of a $65 million budget, you guys are that much, but still, I think that if we're gonna set an example, and feel that ourselves, in my opinion, that's important philosophically.
I would argue that figures like 22% may become more common given continued zeros, because we are the only, sometimes the only elected official category that is treated, treat ourselves this way. And the comp board has their job as well. So as long as the law is the law, and a lot of us myself included, aren't perfectly happy with the way it works because it's hard to communicate to the public, it is the way it is. And this proposal would carry more weight with me personally, just ideologically, if there was a commitment to hold everyone, all the elected officials and deputies, to zero, because that is the follow-up motion here. It's not to separate and then wait and see, it's to separate and then go to zero. So.
You can always delay the item B till later.
Let me just make sure, I want to make sure that we're clear. This isn't setting, so that no one in the audience has a heart attack, this isn't setting any other elected official or deputy at zero. It's only setting ourselves.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, maybe I
Yes.
misheard. Okay.
I just wanted it, on the record, that if we're going to not necessarily appeal to the same metrics and data and comparables we use for other elected officials, if we're going to do that just for the supervisors, are we going to do that evenly for others as well? And the answer I'm hearing is no commitment on that.
I would personally, I know I'm one guy, I would say no.
Okay.
That I would not expect of others what I'm expecting of myself.
Well, I'm sorry, were you done?
Yeah.
It's not so much about you or me, it's the positions we're voting on, which is a classic, discussion point we all have with ourselves. Mr. Gill?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things that were just said here. Supervisor Taylor said that this was affirmed last year. As you recall, there was a disagreement here last year about that. And there was an assistant county attorney said he was comfortable at that meeting. During that meeting, I voiced my disapproval. I didn't think that the code section allows you to do that, and that is still my position. And after that meeting, the county attorney came to my office and visited with me about that, and he said, you may very well be right, but he asked me not to proceed, and I agreed not to do that at that time. We do have a new county attorney now, and I think it would be wise to seek an opinion to see if this motion that is before you is even legal to be considered at this point. Because you read the code section, it's 2 sentences. Is it okay if I read the
Yeah,
code section?
I've got it right here.
All right.
if
Do you
people
want to
need
read it?
You can.
Okay. What it says is the Board of Supervisors may adopt a decrease in compensation paid to supervisors irrespective of the county compensation board's recommended compensation schedule or other approved changes in compensation paid to other elected county officers. And then it says a decrease in compensation paid to supervisors shall be adopted by the Board of Supervisors no less than 30 days before the county budget is certified under Section 2417. Now, the county budget is going to be certified, March 28th?
Correct.
So it would be February 28th is, you have up until that time in order to deal with that issue. So it's not, you can do it right, you need to do it right now. It's not necessary.
So may I just ask,
Sure.
you're saying that the window to be able to do this legally right now is from today up until February
Right.
28th?
And what I
But after
believe,
February 28th, it's no longer.
what I believe that code section deals with is just your established salaries. And that's what the history of this was, that there was a long time that you couldn't ever reduce county officials' wages. And there's an attorney general's opinion that states that until they passed this and changed this code section. That attorney general's opinion no longer applies to that. But I think that it would behoove you folks to get an opinion on whether you can even do that at this point. I think this is way premature to be dealing with this issue at this time. And it does, politically speaking, it does have an impact on how you, for the years I've been here, how you consider and deliberate the other elected officials' wages. Is that when you're sending that message, you're saying, we took zero, you guys should do the same. And that's what it boils down to. And I appreciate the fact that we have a new supervisor here now, because I get to tell the story of what I've always talked about with the supervisor wages. And it's always been concerning to me, because you want to get people who, who really want to run for this job because they want to do good things for the county, but they also whether it's worth that opportunity to do that. And several years ago, Supervisor Ray Burnite was here. How long ago was that, Dennis? 20 years ago?
20 years, 25
Yes.
years.
And
least.
at that time, it was the same thing that Woodbury County continued to do, and the supervisors, and I criticized them for that, and I continue to criticize them for that, is that what Ray Burnite said to me, Pat, you get those wages up there so high that everybody will want this job. And I said, what is wrong with that? Is that you do want good people that want to consider these positions and do well for the Woodbury County, but you also want people to take a look at it and see whether it's worth their time. Thank you for that opportunity.
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
So a couple of things just to be aware of. Last year, our assistant county attorney disagreed with that position. My understanding was our previous county attorney disagreed with the auditor's interpretation of the code. I disagree with that as well. And I have asked our county attorney this year to once again weigh in on this. I believe that the code was created very specifically because oftentimes supervisors would say, I had no choice. They forced me once again to take an increase. I think it otherwise. Last year, and I've seen previous boards to the makeup of this one, give everyone zero across the board. Last year, this board gave itself zero while giving over 17% increases to certain elected officials and their deputies, as well as 9% and all the way down the line, and did not leave everyone at zero. Gave, in fact, higher increases than any other county employees were receiving at that time. I believe we do have a very tight window, as Supervisor Radig alludes to. And I also believe that there's two other things that you ought to be aware of. One, and I have not heard this raised, there is a specific code that says unless this board adopts a separate resolution laying out the reasons why they are adopting an increase, that no increase shall be effective. That did not happen last year, nor do I believe it will happen this year. And so with that being pointed out, an assistant county attorney, Joshua Woodman, pointed that out as well. If you don't pass a separate resolution, that won't go into effect. And then the last thing that I would say is if we are, at the end of the day, criticized for not taking an increase, and it's simply a matter of doing a decrease, I will move that this board decrease its salary by $1, which philosophically would say that that can be done. And so if we have to end up going that route, which I don't think legally we will have to do, because I don't think that the county attorney's office has sided with your interpretation of it, that is also left to this code, not to adopt a resolution to decrease our salary by $1 and so on. So those would be some of my comments.
Any other board member comments? On the resolution, I would say 2 wrongs don't make a right, so we'll address both. I believe this action is just fundamentally premature, given the lack of the comp board's recommendation. For better or for worse, being a part of the discussions ourselves lends us to the discussion personally. I personally dislike making the discussion about ourselves as individuals, as we are separately considering the positions, because I don't think there has been consideration given on the metrics in the cases of the supervisors, as we do for every other elected official. And this is a classic, dichotomy here. So nothing new, but that's just, I'm not going to convince anyone on the board otherwise, but, that's why I don't think it's nefarious to have ourselves in the discussion, because the code section does allow us to, if we want to reduce ourselves and then be a part of the recommended increase, at that point, we're going to know what the comp board recommendation is. So that gives us that window before the budget publication, I believe, on February 14th it was. So there are opportunities to do that, provided the comp board has a timely meeting, which hasn't been an issue the last few years.
Can I ask a question? Can I clarify?
Yes,
Can we separate out without having to approve the 0%?
it already is separated.
It
There's
is
2
separated.
motions.
There's two,
The
right,
first
okay.
motion is to separate,
And then it's
which is a prerequisite. If it fails, there's no action on the second
right,
item.
right. Okay,
So the answer is yes, you can separate and not do item B.
okay, all right.
So the motion is to separate, as stated in the agenda item, consider separately. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Bettinger?
Sure. Only I would say, I'm the new kid on the block. I would say, from being here for these last 9 years, watching the board, I do think I applaud you guys. You've wanted to make sure fiscally conservative. Make sure leaders go first, and make sure consider others above yourself. And so I think I appreciate everyone's desire to be conservative. Keep the levy flat and all this year. I was doing some research. Over the last 8 years, the supervisor's average increase has been 1.75% over 8 years. That includes 0 years and a 1 or 2% over those 8 years. So I'm with you, right? In my personal job, I'm not getting a raise this year. My other job, and I haven't for many years. That's the nature of church sometimes. But I appreciate you guys' willingness in seeing that, And so I think the heart of the board is whether, item B is approved or not. I do think overall my goal is committed. That's why I ran, is to be fiscally conservative and do our best to not to have to tax more. But I do believe if the workman's worth their wage, and I also believe at some point if you won't get the best if you sometimes don't pay the best. And I know that most of us don't go into this role sometimes. In this role, maybe I'm speaking from out of arrogance and ignorance, but always for the money or for the position and the limelight and the media coverage or whatever. But I think sometimes at some point, there has to be some increase probably, just so you can keep up and also hire and make sure we get good talent, good people that love Woodbury County. But I have no problem with separating out, but I think the 0% increase would be, I think, premature procedurally. I'm not saying I would not do that yet. I'm just saying at this point, I'd like to just see where the numbers are at, but I do see by separation, it would give us the ability to go to 0 for what you're proposing, Supervisor Taylor, so. But I appreciate everyone's hard work and just desire to, not be money hungry up here. But anyhow, so.
I'd like to wrap this up by saying all of these discussions about what's fair and what is approved is intended to be a part of the budget process as it is, and these are additional discussions that, in this case, I feel like it's out of order, not procedurally, but just fundamentally. And I can't support the motion to separate today because I know the intent, because it's the second item. It's to separate, it's to go to zero. So to Mr. Bittinger's point, I mean, why would I support the first if I know that the motion is to go to zero without, consideration of comparables, the comp board, or what I would say is due diligence. So that is why I will not be supporting that. And with that, Mr. Gill, please call the roll.
Bittinger,
Nay.
Reddick,
Aye.
Taylor,
Aye.
Ung.
Nay. Motion fails 2-2. Ung and Bittinger opposed.
So can I just ask a question, just for the good? Does anybody anywhere have an idea of when the comp board is planning on meeting? Given that it is January 11th, and that's a pretty important issue, and or is that just something we'll find out someday, somehow?
I've
somewhere?
asked through Dennis. I haven't called the chair, Doug Phillips. I believe he's been the chair.
He's been out of town. Their full intent is to meet this month. And I've
That would really be good.
made it pretty explicit, we need it this month.
I'm not sure why they were able to meet so early last year, but that certainly helped the budget process, not having to plug in a.
I would say part of it's probably because you have a different representative.
Oh, is there a new representative on the comp board?
Well, James would be picking his representative as opposed to PJ picking James' representative.
Right. So it all comes down to James picking his representative, is it?
I think we need to, if we can, and if you would be willing to, Mr. Chair, or someone needs to proactively, or I can ask, and just informationally, it's too big of an issue to just leave to guess. I think there's legal implications if we don't have a comp board meeting, and I'm not saying they're
Right.
not going to, I just.
I agree.
I'd like to-
I'd prefer it meet as soon as possible every year. And there's been years in the past where there's been a little bit of a lag. And these are volunteer, I made comments at the board meeting and I was called on the carpet by one of them for being too harsh, because they said, this is a volunteer position, we're doing this is a volunteer thing. And it's true, but I'll reach out.
Appreciate it.
As I think others have, and just impress the urgency for the budget process. A lot happens in January and February. And I know a lot of it's driven by other elected officials. We don't see much urgency because, typically it's the other elected officials that are more proactive in getting them together. Any other comments? Okay, I'll make sure the board's aware of what I hear at least. Moving on to item 10 from the county attorney, James Loomis, for information. This is addressing/filling the attorney vacancies in the office.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to bring to your attention the number one issue that my office is facing and my number one priority as I assume a new role as Woodbury County Attorney. And that is filling the 5 vacant attorney positions that we currently have in our office. And the vacancies essentially have been ongoing since approximately mid-June. The vacancies have been occurring for various reasons. And new opportunities, different opportunities, retirement. But at the end of the day, what our office is facing is 5 vacant positions. And in that time period from June up till now, it's my understanding that we've had only 4 applicants in that time period. And one of which we hired from of those applicants. The other 3 applicants, in my opinion, were lacking significantly in their abilities to be prosecutors, and so that they were not hired. When I ran for Woodbury County Attorney, my goal, and what I believe the County Attorney's Office is tasked with, is working hand in hand with law enforcement, community leaders, to hold criminals accountable for what they've done, to get victims justice, to deter others from committing similar offenses, and just to ensure the safety as much as possible to all of Woodbury County. All of Woodbury County, and I think our goal is the same, is that we all want to feel safe in our homes, in our churches, going to run errands at the grocery store, in our schools. And in short, what I view and how I view the position as county attorney is that we're tasked with serving. We're here to serve, and in serving, what we're supposed to do is make sure that we're keeping people as safe as possible. And what I'm here to kind of let you know is that the manner in which our office is currently operating, being down 5 attorneys, is if this continues indefinitely and we continue to run on a skeleton crew in my office, what we're going to have is we're going to have a decrease in our ability to serve the people of Woodbury County. And that's, I'm just being frank with the board, that we cannot continue to run on a deficiency of 5 prosecuting attorneys. A fully staffed Woodbury County Attorney's Office consists of 3 prosecutors in the juvenile division, 4 indictable misdemeanor prosecutors, 1 simple misdemeanor prosecutor, 8 felony prosecutors, including myself as the county attorney, 1 civil attorney, and 1 prosecutor in the fines and collections and forfeiture division of our office. 18 attorneys comprise a fully slated county attorney's office. And so essentially, if you go just by essentially the prosecutors of our office, we're essentially down 1/3 of our staff. We are currently down 2 indictable misdemeanor attorneys, and we are currently down 3 prosecutors in the felony division. I ran the numbers this afternoon before coming down here, or I had our office manager run our numbers. We have almost 2,100 active cases being prosecuted in our office. That's significant. That's a lot of cases that are being prosecuted by our office. And because of the shortage that we're experiencing, we've had to shuffle and move people around just to get coverage on what needs to be handled and what needs to be done. As you know, Joshua Widman is our civil attorney. He's no longer attending the meetings and doing those responsibilities because we had to move him into the indictable misdemeanor position to handle indictable misdemeanors. We had to move one of our juvenile attorneys back to the felony division to help and assist with that. We've had to place additional burdens on our fines and collections attorney. She's handling the substance abuse committals, the mental health committals, in addition to the debt collection and forfeitures that she was already doing. In addition, she's assisting me with some of the civil issues that come up and questions that are asked by those in the county that need questions asked. And so we've placed a lot of extra burden on the remaining staff that we have in our office. And thankfully, we have excellent people in my office. And we've been able to sustain and get coverage because of the willingness to make some sacrifices and do some things that they maybe not necessarily want to have to do, but they are doing it. And because we have wonderful office staff that is also pitching in to help in taking care of some of the filing responsibilities, filing probation violations, those kinds of things, to take some of the off the plate of the attorneys. And so I am here tonight to let you know that we need to do something. We need to do something different than what's currently being done. My plan moving forward is both long-term and short-term. In the long term, and I'm here tonight to simply give information to this board, and next week I'm going to be asking that action be taken to address some of these issues and some of these concerns that we're facing in the office. Looking ahead in terms of long-term solutions and what I believe can help and assist are two things. The first is, as I look ahead and I look at my own personal experience as a prosecutor, creating a paid internship program in the Woodbury County Attorney's Office. That was invaluable for me. It was an opportunity that I had to solidify what I wanted to do and be a prosecutor. But I believe that it's so important and something that would be of benefit to the Woodbury County Attorney's Office, because what you do by creating and establishing that kind of internship program is, in my opinion, you create a potential pool of future applicants that you know, that you've worked with, that you have an understanding of this is their capabilities, this is their skill set, and you know off the bat whether they're a good fit or they're not a fit for the office. And so whether there's an opening or not, in my opinion, what you do is you create that pool of applicants, and there may be an opening later on that person wants to come back because they had such a good experience in the office. In my discussions with other counties throughout the state, it's not something that is significantly onerous in terms of payment. From what, in my discussions with those other counties, we're talking about $15 to $18 an hour. And it's my understanding that the Attorney General's office had a program where they would assist with payment of that. I am following up with the new administration in the Attorney General's office. As you probably know, Brenna Bird was elected as the new Attorney General. I am not certain whether that program will continue, but even if that program doesn't continue, I believe that it's something that is important for this board to consider, and allowing me to hire an intern to start generating future pools of applicants. And as I also look ahead in long-term planning for our office, what I want to do is I want to create a second deputy attorney position. Currently, our office has one. We have one deputy percentage attorney in our office. I would like there to be 2 deputy attorneys to have flexibility in the office, because ultimately at the end of the day, what I anticipate happening is that most of the attorneys that will be hired will be 0 to very little experience coming in that will require significant training to get up to speed. In my experience, going on 20 years in the office, the open positions have been 1 or 2 at a time. And the other attorneys in either the misdemeanor division or the felony division, they all pool together. They could work with that new attorney. But as I look at this, as I look at what our office is facing, we're gonna have multiple attorneys that need a head and that need a leader beyond myself that can focus on helping them and training them, because my role is to continue to prosecute the majority, the cases that I think the people expect me to prosecute. And my role is to train the felony attorneys. And I need somebody in the office, in the misdemeanor division, that can oversee that and that could assist and help with training those new attorneys. And so those are the two things that I'm looking at for long-term planning for our office, is to implement those two objectives and to come back next week and give more specifics regarding that to this board and ask the board to take action on that. In terms of short-term, the short-term, in my opinion, and in my discussions with different county attorneys' offices and in kind of reviewing kind of the pay scale of other county attorneys' office, whether you have a high opinion of the pay or not, the current pay of the assistant county attorneys, it is not competitive. It just simply is not. And in order to attract, discussion that I had just a moment ago regarding the Board of Supervisors, if you're going to attract competent, good people, you're going to have competitive compensation packages for them. And I had a discussion with a young lady who's currently a prosecutor over in Nebraska that I'm trying to convince to come over here. And she wants to, I think, make her way back closer to home. But she just could not wrap her mind around taking a $15,000 pay cut and not having any vacation for a year. Because that's really what it amounts to. And I understand that. You're asking somebody who has experience to take a significant pay cut and to start off with no vacation. And that's a difficult pill to swallow. And so I do believe that the lack of competitive compensation is a real hindrance to our office only having 4 applicants since June. And so what I'm here to propose and for the board to consider as we move into next week are 4 things. And these are ideas that I've had. The first is a percentage wage increase for all the attorneys in our office. And whether that's 4% or 5%, I believe that there needs to be a percentage increase for all of the attorneys in our office. I know that this board has addressed it last year with different departments in doing that through ARPA funds. And my request will be next week is to do that in a similar fashion, is to raise those step wages for the Woodbury County Attorney's Office. Some of the information that I handed you tonight, that top page is the union contract, the last page of the union contract that sets out the different scale wages or the steps wages for 2022 to 2023 and then moving ahead into 2023 and 2024. It's Appendix A, wage and salary schedule. And then that bottom, I got some handwritten numbers. That's essentially the hourly pay for what that salary is. And I've also included in the packet of information with you some comparables from different counties in Iowa. I believe that they're comparable in terms of size and the types of just kind of comparables in terms of kind of what we have to deal with and address in terms of a criminal prosecution standpoint. You've got Dubuque County there, Scott County, Story County, Pottawatomie County. And so I'd ask the board to kind of look into that and review those in preparation for next week. What it comes down to is essentially, other than Black Hawk County, all the other comparable counties in the state have higher salaries than the attorneys in our office. And I think that that is a real hindrance, like I said before. And so that's something that I am planning to propose to this board and would ask the board to take consideration of as we move into next week. And the second thing is that the union contract only allows someone, despite their experience, to start at step 4 of the contract. Someone could have 12 years of experience and you're only allowed to start them at step 4. That needs to change, in my opinion. I need to have some flexibility. If someone has 6 years experience, I would like to start them at step 6. Or if they have 8 years experience, to start them at step 8. It's really hard to convince someone, like I said before, to come in with years of experience, but you're only allowed to start them at step 4. I'd at least like to start them at a wage that's based commensurate with their experience.
Could I interrupt you there,
Yes,
Mr. Loomis?
Mr. Honor.
One consideration I have on that, as far as starting at a higher step based on actual years of experience, is I don't want there to be like an unintended consequence of existing staff coming back to you and saying, well, I was hired at this step and by now I should be 2 steps up. So if that's one of the remedies this board takes, I would just caution us to see if there's a fair way to value the office as a whole. Because, we have to tackle the hiring issue and also the retention issue separately.
Indeed, that is a very good point, Mr. Chair, and I've thought that through on many nights about how to go about this and what is fair to all the attorneys in the office. And so my approach to that is that this is a dual approach. That's why I'm also going to be asking for a percentage increase for all the attorneys in the office, in addition to being allowed to start them at a step that's commensurate with their experience. And so it is something that I have thought about, but I appreciate you bringing that forward for the attention of the board, Mr. Chair. The third thing is that I would like consideration of is to start them off with 1 week of vacation. I think that that's reasonable. People expect, good, bad, or indifferent, people today expect to start with vacation time. And when I started, I didn't have any vacation time. And that was something that I was willing to accept because being a prosecutor was what I wanted to do. And it still is something that I want to do. But I think, being frank, it's really hard to convince millennials, or whatever generation we're in now, to come and take a position where they don't get any vacation time. I'm not suggesting to this board that they don't have paid holidays and that they're not treated well on that end. But again, I believe that the lack of vacation time is a hindrance. And the fourth item that I've considered, at least in terms of just putting forward for consideration purposes, is a bonus to new prosecutors when they get hired, and then at the end of the first year. What that amount would be, I'm not certain, but it's something that I have thought about and am considering that would be a way to incentivize applicants to our office. And so those are kind of the items that I've thought of. I am certainly open to suggestions from this board and am willing to consider anything. But my purpose here tonight is to bring this matter to your attention so that it can be addressed, because, like I said, at the end of the day, at some point I can only ask the attorneys and the staff in my office, I can only have them take on so much more. The job is stressful, it's challenging, and people get burned out. And that's the reality of it. I'm not going to complain to you about it. I'm just telling you from my perspective, I can envision that happening. And what I don't want to see happen is to have those attorneys that remain in our office who are good, competent prosecutors leave because they get burned out, because we have asked them to do so much more due to the current shortage that we have. Finally, what I would let the board know is that I asked Dennis to kind of give me some help on kind of what's left in the budget, because we haven't been paying assistants for 6 months now at different points in time. And what Dennis provided to me and what he provided to you here this afternoon is kind of the unspent budget salary is about $458,005. Is that right, Dennis?
Yeah, I got to make one correction.
Okay.
On Sandvik, who was formerly Drury before she got married, They did spend up till November 17th, I believe, 45,375, so I had to take that off our totals.
Okay,
So our total this year would be 413,000 if he hired nobody. And then next year, it would be, what did I say here? 429,000 if he didn't fill any positions all year next year. So this year, he does have 413,000 available this year to do something.
so I believe that, thank you for that, Dennis. So I believe that there is some flexibility in the budget for this. Again, I am open to suggestions from this board. But I am trying to think of short-term solutions and long-term solutions. It does no good to do a short-term solution without anything addressing the long-term. And so I'm trying to think long-term as well as short-term so that we can make sure that we are serving the folks of Woodbury County like we're supposed to. Be happy to answer any questions that the board may have about my thoughts. Certainly be happy to address them more specifically next week, but again, I do intend to put an action item up for the board's consideration next week. I just didn't want to spring anything on the board by doing that. I wanted to give you some headway moving into that so you can at least review that, call me, talk to me, about anything that you might have questions about. But that's essentially what I wanted to bring forward to the board tonight. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of update you on where the county attorney's office is.
These are union negotiated positions, correct?
They are union
So
negotiated positions.
These would all be an MOU.
It would be.
Is what you're suggesting?
Yes, it is, Mr. Raddick. And we, as I understand it, Melissa can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that we're going into the last year of our union contract, so it would be up for negotiation after that. I'm essentially, like I said, this is kind of a short-term solution I'm trying to put forward to kind of help our office out.
Well, it's hard not to notice the sheer amount of steps is a lot higher than a lot of the other counties too, and two areas in Woodbury County we're having difficulty hiring. It's two areas where they have lots of steps, so just an observation.
Mr. Taylor?
Well, congratulations on the relatively new position, and I commend you on bringing forward the proposal. I'm excited about it. Without over-promising and under-delivering, I'm excited to see what you put forward next week. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I believe that this board has tried to meet the needs, whether it's jailers or secondary roads where we have a need that's brought before us, and so I'd like to see us act on that next week and meet those needs and not have one unfilled position. One thing that I would just ask, in terms of vacation, even if it's 2 weeks or something that's greater, or it's commensurate with other counties, that doesn't cost us anything. And so I would just put that as, if you're looking for a little bit of feedback, if that incentivizes somebody to come because it's 2 weeks rather than one, to me, that's no skin off of any fiscal taxpayer's back. The other one is on the bonus dollars, whether that's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. I talked to Dennis a little bit today about that could be paid initially. Let's say it's a $3,000 or $5,000 bonus on the front end, and then from a retention standpoint, maybe at the back end after having stayed for 1 year potentially from ARPA funds. And again, that's a way that you can help us help you. Because those aren't tax dollars either, and we do have some availability there. So just all of that to say, however you want to structure that, so that it's not a one and done. Somebody comes for 2 or 3 months, gets the bonus and leaves. If it's payable 50% upon a year's completion, I have asked Dennis to ask our consultant how that can be structured, if that's allowable.
Dennis has some news.
And yes, that is allowable under section 4.1 of the ARPA rules, final rules. And I talked to her a little bit. I said her idea was pay them, say, $6,000, $3,000 after 6 months, $3,000, or $3,000 after 3 months, $3,000 after 6 months. But at least they're staying, and then there's an incentive to keep staying on, and that's their bonus. That can be covered under 4.1. step one, where you give a increase like we done with the jailers and the correctional officers, that can be done under 3.1 with ARPA funds also.
You're saying for the increase of the base in the first
Yeah,
year, but not in
say 4 or
subsequent
5%,
years?
Right.
So
You can do
I
it.
just wanted to mention that to the county attorney so that if you come back with, let's say there's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in bonus funding, how you structure that, I think is something that you can put forward that makes the most sense to you. And something that I guess my last comment or question is, have you started or is it something that upon approval of the board, you would reach out to the union in terms of crafting an MOU based on the allowance of funding and how the steps, all of those things work out?
Yes, my intention is to reach out to the union to make sure that they're involved. If they've got any objection, I'm not sure that they would. I would hope that they wouldn't, but, you know, I don't want to exclude the union. Obviously, they're a participant and will be a participant moving forward. So I do intend to keep them involved. I've been working with Melissa to try and make sure that they're involved with this process and reach out to them if there's any concerns or issues that they have.
Are all of these 18 budgeted positions union?
They are, if we change to, if the board accepts my proposal to add a second deputy position, that second deputy position would not be union covered. It would just be a separate, just like the current deputy position. The one deputy position that we have now is not union covered. So it would not be a union covered position. All the other, well, the civil attorney position is not union covered either, but all the other positions are union covered.
So 17 out of the 18 currently budgeted positions are union.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, again, thank you for bringing it forward. Yes, just a moment. We will have to see what we can accomplish through an MOU. I do like the idea of the ARPA funds, using that for an initial bonus, maybe a retention bonus as part of that, if that's allowable. Then that doesn't, adversely impact anyone as far as fairness. And then you can make an adjustment that's overall, that's more, even, I guess. Because last year we went through this process, of course, and I don't recall the board getting any, I didn't realize this was such an issue, because I don't think the board had got any contact from the union on the way things were in the office. And to hear that we are consistently down 5 is a great argument for any ARPA uses we can justify for retention and recruitment. Mr. Bittinger.
Yes, Mr. Loomis, do other counties pay bonuses? Or do you know of it in Iowa? And if they do, could you get us a
I can
framework?
look at that, Mr. Bittinger. That was something that I had not
Okay.
checked into specifically. I'm not aware of any from at least the discussions that I have had with any county attorney's offices offering bonuses. What I will say in addition is that there are shortages throughout the state. There's a shortage of applicants. As I'm calling around talking to different county attorneys' offices. But what's interesting to me, and what I think is of note, is that kind of the comparables that I'm submitting to you tonight, they don't have openings. All their positions are filled. And and so I think that's of note, that those counties do not have any openings. And circumstances aside, I think that plays a major role.
Gotcha.
But I will look into that, Mr. Bittinger, and see if I can find any comparables that would offer bonuses, or any county attorney's offices that offer bonuses.
All right. And
Sorry.
okay, I just got one more. You said you had 2,100 active cases. So divided by the 18, that's about 116 cases of an attorney. Is that a lot? I just don't know. I'm just wanting to learn. Is that a lot for?
To give you some perspective, so when the misdemeanor division would have individually the most cases, simply because of the nature of what they deal with. when I was in the misdemeanor division, I had 300 active cases at any one time.
Okay.
And that was generally true across the board, give or take 25, 30 cases. So you'd be somewhere between probably 270 to 300 cases. And I think that that's down a little bit right now from where it was when I was up there. Generally speaking, the felony attorneys probably have anywhere between 50 and 60 cases, which may not sound like a lot, but it is a lot when you're handling a murder case, because those take up significantly more time than your kind of run-of-the-mill OWI or possession of marijuana case. Those are generally just kind of, you process them through, you get them resolved. And so what has happened up to this point is that when attorneys have left, we basically split up the remaining cases that attorney has, and we divide them up amongst those that are left. And so, like I said, you've continued to add to that. So the 2,100, or approximately the 2,100 cases, would include the juvenile China cases, the juvenile delinquency cases, the forfeiture cases that we have, all the criminal cases that we have, the substance abuse and the mental health committals that we have. It includes all of that.
Okay.
And so it's a significant number. It's not balanced out in terms of when you just do simple math,
Right, yeah.
118 per attorney. It doesn't kind of come out that way. The misdemeanor attorneys would have the bulk of cases in terms of sheer number, but that's always been the case. When we're fully staffed or short, the misdemeanor positions are always going to have the bulk of the cases, simply because simple misdemeanor attorneys, you're dealing with all the traffic citations, all the simple assaults, simple thefts, kind of all that. They have all of that caseload. Again, the indictables, misdemeanor positions, they handle all the OWIs generally and all of the indictable crimes. And so it's not necessarily even, but I think the, quote, workload is about the same.
Okay, thank you. Don Sanders.
Dennis?
On the name bonus, it probably should be referred to as retention if they're hired, and then after they get a pay or a bonus or retention pay 3 or 6 months down the road, it's better, it's called retention instead of bonus.
Right. Anything after the date of hire is, we've been
Retention.
down that road
Keep
before.
trying
We
to
know
keep
how
them
that
here.
works with retention. I mean, one thing from looking at just briefly these numbers off the bat is it's not so much the high end that we are out of whack. It's the low end. Like you said, I don't know if 15,000 is a average sort of a, gap between these, or just in your experience talking to that one potential applicant, but, that's where I guess you were talking about starting at step 4 would be, I don't know, eliminating the other options
Yeah.
at least. So, Mr. Taylor.
So this is just a process question, and maybe this is for Dennis and Mr. Loomis at the same time. You're going to bring us a proposal next week, and it's going to ask us for a certain amount of dollars to be able to, what I'm wondering is, if we say, yes, this is fine as far as moving these steps by these percentages, you go back to the union and they say, well, we're not, amenable to that. We think that shorts people at the top end or the bottom end. How is this going to work process-wise? I think generally speaking, it sounds like there's support to meet that need. I'm just wondering, is it a situation where you work some of those things out with the union prior to coming back, do you think? Or
I think that would be something that I would have to address with the union. I mean, if they're in disagreement, I would have to essentially convince them that this is a benefit.
All right.
And so I'm hopeful that that's not the case.
Okay.
I'm a little disappointed, frankly, that the union has not been in front of this board before now. And I'm doing it because that's their job to me as I look at it. And so I am here to look out for the best interests of this office. And so that's why I'm here. It's not to get in between the union and the contract. It's basically to make sure that our office is functioning like we need to function. And I want the union to be on board. And if they're not, I'm going to have to figure that out probably myself, would be my guess.
Okay.
I think step 1 will help.
Step one
Step
meaning
two.
what?
Step one is raising everybody 4 or 5% through the whole scale.
Okay.
Then when we start to steps 6 and 8, I think that'll help the whole process, because you're raising them also, but also starting people with years of experience. So I think it's kind of counterbalance to make the ones currently here satisfied, and also it's helping them out in the long run.
I would just say if there's anything determined in your talks with Melissa that is an improvement that falls outside of an MOU, then bring that as a separate action item. We can definitely handle that. But anything that is under the MOU process is basically approval to move forward with last time I think we approved the MOU process, did we? And then that came back to us for final approval, and there was some additions and changes the union had in those cases. But there's no reason the board can't give consensus approval to any of these.
And I think as long as it's through the MOU process and obviously not reopening,
Right.
that would be the
Right.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, Melissa Thomas, HR Director. I would say anything that's already addressed in the contract, be it the step choice or the, when you can take your vacation, I think that would be an MOU. I do not believe the bonus is addressed in the contract. I'm not sure that would need to be an MOU,
Okay.
so.
And it's funded separately, potentially, so, yeah.
Is this action too soon, or, requesting action too soon? I mean, there's, 35,000 graduates every year, and USD, if you're graduating from there, Iowa's a more attractive state than South Dakota or Nebraska for pay, especially in a county attorney's office. I don't know, I know previously there was no effort to recruit in the universities.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Mr. Raddick. I am, that is part of my efforts to go find people. It is my opinion, it's my belief that if they're not coming to you, you should make an effort to go to them. I do have, and I'm working to schedule on-campus interviews at the 3 kind of law schools in our area that offer spring on-campus interviews. Those are Nebraska, Drake, and Iowa. South Dakota does not offer spring interviews. Creighton does not offer spring interviews. But it is my intention to reach out to those places because they may not know. And if they don't know, then there's obviously not going to have any applicants from those places. And so my approach to this situation is kind of multifaceted. I am open to suggestions, as I said before. I am taking steps to go on recruiting trips and visits to try to find applicants because, like I said before, at the end of the day, they're clearly not coming to us. I think, as I said, the salary is part of that. But I need to go to them, and I need to make an effort to put us out there as an opportunity for these law school students to at least consider. And at the end of the day, I think that being a prosecutor affords you so many opportunities to be in the courtroom. And even if it's not something that you want to make a career out of, there are lots of opportunities that one would have to start your career in a prosecutor's office. And so I want to reach out to those places so at least we're on their radar, that it's a consideration, that at least it's something that they would think about. And so I'm making those efforts, Mr. Raddick, as part of my approach to this situation that I'm trying to address.
And hopefully we can give you some tools that you can be able to say between the bonus, vacation, increased pay, and for Nebraska, the first time you can be part of a winning team, that would be a good line to.
And I'm not sure I understood you, Mr. Raddick, on the timing, but I would think that at least an approval of an MOU process is in order. I don't know if you meant specific items that we needed to wait on, but I don't think we need to wait on approving directing HR to craft a updated MOU with the recommendations or something like that.
Yeah, and it'd probably help them as advertising, publications with also.
Well, I was asking Mr. Raddick a question, sorry.
Sorry.
I guess as far as timing, it's first time this has been on the agenda.
Right, sure.
I mean.
Well, that's not his fault.
No, I get that,
Yeah.
but, you know, just to say, hey, we got something for action next week, that's, I don't know, just seems awfully quick to me.
Well,
I'm open to whenever the board would be ready for me to act on it, but it is my opinion that this needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And so, like I said, I'm not trying to spring anything on any of the board. My purpose this afternoon was to bring it to your attention if you weren't aware of it, and so that we can at least move forward, whether that's next Tuesday or thereafter, Mr. Raddick. You know, whatever the board wants to do and how the board wants to address it and when it wants to address it, I'm fine with it. But the sooner that we address it is where I'm kind of headed for.
Mr. Taylor.
I'd like to see it addressed soon. I guess if it was a case where you thought you were losing one attorney in the future and you're gonna be down one, it'd be one thing, but the vacation, the bonuses through ARPA funding, like I said, they don't cost us, and to do the 4%, really, I want to put this carefully and not crassly, but we've been not expending the budget that we should have been expending because you've been down 5. Is that a fair statement? I mean, in other words.
That's how I look at it.
Right.
Yes.
So to me, it's going to take us a long time to catch up even with what we should have been expending for a long time because we haven't offered the level of service. So I would like to see something sooner rather than later. And if we need more time with it, then I think we need more time after looking at something. But I would like to see you come back next week at least to continue the discussion.
I agree. I agree with you, Supervisor Taylor.
Let's see an action item next week. We can defer on it if we need to.
Very good. Thank you for
All
your
right,
time, gentlemen.
thank you. Next up, we have item 11, Building Services, Kenny Schmitz with a good news report on Trosper Hoyt.
Kenny Schmitz, Building Services Director. Well, the good news is we had a Teams meeting with Wicker Roads Engineering to discuss our issues. Chairman Ung was part of that discussion. They presented us with really 3 options to address our fire brick issues. Those were, the first one was to inspect the steel beams for loose material and remove as needed, and reapply fireproofing throughout the facility. We talked through that option, and it was I guess a conjoined response of all of us that probably wasn't the best long-term solution for anyone. And so we moved on to the second option, which was remove clay tile completely from beams and reapply fireproofing throughout the facility. We also talked through this item and discussed how that might be accomplished. I suggested that it would probably have to be contracted out. It would be a major project. The contractors would probably want the spaces vacated so they could come in and do the work, which is almost an impossibility to relocate all the people. It'd be very time consuming even if it was contracted out, and very disruptive. So we looked at option 3. Option 3 was suggested that we wrap the steel beams with a steel enclosure, somewhat like a mesh, and then fill that mesh with grout. We talked through that. Again, probably contractor required, very disruptive. Would have to have the spaces probably cleared out of all personnel, and it would be very, very messy. In other words, the surrounding areas, whether it be the ceiling, carpet, whatever, would be disturbed while we did that project. Finally, after talking through those items, I suggested that there was a possibility of maybe a hybrid option or what might be best solutions, and we talked through that. We talked about whether the project could be completed more quickly by a contracted method or via in-house through building services staff. There are obviously pluses and minuses to both. We all seem to agree that while it would still take a lengthy period of time to complete this, that it would be best handled by building services. We could complete different areas at a time instead of trying to, for instance, trying to attack a half a floor all at once. So it would probably be completed faster that way. But the option, the hybrid option was, and the engineer was going to take a look at this and do some drawings to come up with how that would actually be done. But we talked about using, I don't know if the board is familiar with Unistrut and All Thread, but we talked about a suspended device made out of All Thread and Unistrut with a steel plate suspended underneath, but snugged up to the current fire brick. So we'd just be surrounding the current fire brick, wouldn't be removing it, wouldn't be disturbing any of the fireproofing. That suspension would need to be fastened into the decking from up above, but it would allow some adjustment and tight fitment that would secure that fire brick in place in case it did try to come loose. So the engineers agreed that that sounded like it could be a workable solution, and they were going to design some drawings, which I'm guessing will describe the method of anchoring, the size of All Thread, the size of steel that would be used for plating underneath and or around that fire brick. They were going to try to get that to me yesterday. Our meeting was Friday. They didn't get it to me yesterday. I haven't seen anything yet today. Not really surprised. It's asking a lot for an engineer to drop what they're doing and come up with some new drawings for you in a very, very short period of time. So, however, I do expect that to come shortly. And if we do receive that and it looks like a workable solution, building services would begin to do this in areas as we have the time and availability to do it. Again, to give you an idea what would take place is we'd be removing part of an 8-foot ceiling. This fire brick is actually about 3.5 feet above the 8-foot ceiling that we currently have. So it's at, we're around 13.5 feet in the air to accomplish all of this. So it's not just get on a little step ladder and do what you have to do and get back down again. So it's going to take some time, but we'll do our best. In the meantime, while this, if we do move forward in this method, what we will do is some inspections throughout the entire building. The engineer suggested that we go and not just visually inspect those areas of fire brick, but actually go in and do some slight tapping on them to see if there is a loose area. If there is, remove it. We will move immediately forward with doing that. And we also will conduct inspections, timely inspections, whether that be, I don't know what that might be, 6 weeks, every 6 weeks or so, while we are waiting, trying to get to other areas of the building. Does anyone have any questions?
Is there anything you need from this board?
I don't believe so. A lot's been running through my mind on this. I had considered to try to speed this process up if it moves forward, requesting if some of the maintenance staff would like to work overtime on off-duty hours to move this forward more rapidly. That, of course, would increase our cost to our budget. I'm not sure if they would be receptive to that, but just some thoughts running through my mind on how we might get this done quicker if we could.
One thing I talked to Kenny about is as far as moving on the hybrid approach and going office by office is allowing us to tackle it as soon as we can. It seems like the scope of the project could otherwise put us into territory where we have to have project, like a manager and even, is it an architect and slow down the repairs?
Yes, so if we did go with that method on a contractor, actually, we've already contacted an engineer, so we've got that part partially accomplished. But yes, we would be required then to have an engineer oversee the whole thing, do a set of specifications and drawings that would be let out for bid. We would have to have an architect involved, and go through the bid process. And so that is another part, as you all know, when we go through those processes, that's a minimum of a 6-week process, especially if everything has their ducks in a row. So,
Okay. Thank you for the update.
thank you.
Moving on to item 12 from Secondary Roads, County Engineer Mark Nura or his designee. Is item A for action, approve the contract for gravel production at the Little Sioux Pit with Bedrock for $1,575,000.
Good afternoon. There was a error in the backup. The actual cost of the contract is $1,875,000.
Thank you.
Have any questions about this? We negotiated this. This is actually 50 cents lower per ton than the original contract, and will bring a total at Little Sioux to 600,000 ton.
I'd move it.
Sorry. Second the motion by Taylor. Hearing any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item B is approve the contract for overburden removal at the Little Sioux Pit with Bedrock for $108,000.
This is the same contractor that we have there doing the gravel excavation and crushing, and he's given us a really good price of $1.80. We keep a yard to continue moving overburden as they move to the next 300,000 ton of gravel.
I'd move it.
Second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Item 13 from Board Administration, Dennis Butler, is approval of resolution amending resolution number 13,518, authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $2.1 million aggregate principal amount of revenue bonds for Siouxland Regional Transit System Project and approving bank qualification designation.
The reason this amendment is necessary, the IRS did not get back with their forms for bank qualification, so we had to move it to this calendar year. So what that does in turn, out of the 10 million we have this year, 2,100,000 will be used up. It could have been last year, but it was no fault of the body doing the work.
Yes.
What's the residue balance then, or the residual on that after? Do we have anything that's promised out of that 10 million? Otherwise?
Yes, this current year,
Yeah.
it'll be our CIP loan. And that'll be in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 million, so we'll still have 5 million left this year.
Yeah.
So we got plenty.
Okay, thank you. I'd move approval of resolution amending resolution number 13518.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Hearing no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 14, reports on committee meetings. Anybody? None? Item 15, citizen concerns. Item 16, board concerns. We need to schedule a meeting in the near future for collective bargaining. A time thrown out was next Tuesday at 3. I don't know if that works for a couple of you with work obligations.
So is that as a board collectively?
Yes,
or-
a closed session, as we do to start off the process.
Say next Thursday?
No, next
No,
Tuesday.
excuse me.
If that doesn't work, then I suppose I'll get back to you with that. Is it,
That works.
we might need a little bit of time since we have new representation.
If that doesn't work, I'll call Alice in a representation and figure out what other time she can come in. And basically, she'll explain the process, and then the board will give her permission to negotiate an increase or other articles for the union contract for the deputies.
Okay. I'll work with Melissa and see what time works for hopefully all four of us. Next, I just wanted to ask, I'm sorry if it was discussed already, but Mr. Radig, when we had that city conference board meeting and there was a follow-up with the applicant, did you have any updates on that?
Oh, sure. We did come to an agreement at the 123.6, so that'll be going back to the conference board then
Okay,
at some point.
very well. Yes.
Two things. So, in our quest to fill the positions for the committee to assess damages,
Oh,
I think
yes.
that we are collectively making progress. And
Yes.
So, that Barb Parker, I think I mentioned to you, one other applicant who's going to get back, and I know you have some others, and so I'm really happy that that's getting done.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Thanks for reminding me. I can show you guys the list, the work in progress I have after the meeting if you like. But at this point, we look to be fully committed in all categories. And I'll put this on the board agenda next Tuesday for acceptance and sending out. But yeah, we've definitely been going out and finding and getting these appointees, so. Yes?
My other concern, could we take a 5-minute break between this and budget?
Yeah,
Okay,
when we get to
great.
it, yeah, when
All
we
right.
get to it. Another update, I've been involved in several meetings on the county website, along with Dan and our vendor for that, Neapolitan Labs. Great progress. I've given a lot of, personal input, so I'll be very personally offended if you guys don't like it. I'm just kidding. But there's, going to be a lot of extra capability, and it's going to be very snappy, and there's rollout, I think, is it next week? I know tomorrow I have a meeting on where the final product is, and then next week start training departments on how to upload to their sections and all of that. We've retained a lot of the good focuses we've had on there, and hopefully adding to or decreasing the workload on the board office by allowing people to subscribe in all these different areas. On every page, there's a reminder if you want to be updated. Here's the link. You'll get updates, and you won't have to get a personal email from someone. It'll just be automatically sent out. So I'm really, really excited about that. It was brought up. It's not a huge deal right now. I know we're in the middle of the budget, but all the departments have a hodgepodge of 3, 4, 5 megapixel headshots of everybody. We might want to do economies of scale, pick a date after budget, and just find a local photographer that can just knock these out and get all the office holders and department heads handled that way. So it's a little more professional look. Perfect use of gaming funds. Okay, any other board concerns? All right, hearing none, we are recessed for 5 or so minutes until our budget review.
So, I mean, it's accruing slowly, but they can use it right away, and I think that makes a big difference, because you're not taking it off for. Yeah. So I would think that would be easy. It doesn't, vacation doesn't really last. It just, you, not, yeah. So I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to step on Mark's toes. So are you going to start coming to the CIC? So, in our building downstairs in the conference room, so. Okay, so with, you know, the big driveway goes one way, so I call it like the northeast back corner. If you look up, huge radio tower sits behind the building, so you can't miss it. And so the front door, you come in, just go to the left, and there's an elevator and stairs there, right inside, and just go down, and then you'll just follow the whole way around the corner, and there's a conference room and door. So, nice, yeah. 8 o'clock, 8:05 is the Whitney mission, and you probably need to go back. 9 o'clock CIC, and then. No, but, okay, it's usually pretty fast. So, we have another meeting at 10, so it has to be. How you doing? So it's police chief, fire chief, county attorney, sergeant. So we kind of just go around and talk about any issues and. All right, waiting for my budget. Oh, that's good. But it's gonna change because. So. Well, and then it's start times and so forth. It's different. No, I'm gonna accomplish nothing yet. I'll have to go back. It's all good. All right, see ya. Because how you doing? All right. It's okay. You're the same room. Across the hall. I could tell the way you were coming. I saw the name. I'm like, yeah, at least you waited for that. If you saw it, you would just like over it. Yeah. So last year, I know what I'm saying. Well, I'm not afraid to do that. But then. So did you ever know Whitney's? She's certainly, well, they moved her because she fell.
Yeah, that was Morse code. So let's get started. All right, we're back in our budget review session for FY '24. Starting off with a action on cash reserves. I'll present an agenda item on that. This is approval to reduce FY '24 property tax askings by approximately $2.5 million by reducing from reserves the sale of the county farm revenues as previously directed by the board. I trust Mr. Bittinger's reviewed the backup. All of us remember what happened. We sold the county farm, and because it's not a function of county government, we argued and set off to use the funds as a bridge to more sustained revenue during tough budget years when we have the building of the new law enforcement center. And I don't want the public to think that it's only the federal revenue for the law enforcement center that we are building a bridge to. We're also building a bridge to substantially stair-stepped increases from the CF Industries project, which is going to be bringing in tens of millions of dollars in property tax revenues at completion of the 20-year program. So, for a couple reasons, the board has set aside additional money into reserves. We're at currently the highest level we've been in a long, long time. And so it's an appropriate time to use this tool we've set aside. Last year, we didn't use it. We planned to, but then we didn't need to. So rather than building up a reserve that doesn't benefit the taxpayers, we do want to use it. I want to use it this year as we intended in the past 2 years. And I can think of no better budget year than the last one before we have, the construction of the jail complete. And we would start it out with a historically high deficit to close. Any comments?
I think it's a great idea. I think it's something that in selling the county farm, we're able to reduce tax askings, and so I'm supportive.
Very well. Then the motion simply, we have this money, what we call the restricted reserve account in general fund reserves. So the motion for the budget process is to simply reduce general basic reserves. Question?
Can I make the motion?
Yes.
By $2,506,308.
506?
Right, $308. Because this will also be the 2 months that a supervisor isn't sitting in this, and we can reduce by $6,308 as well. So $2,506,000, yeah. Okay, 2.5 million, sorry.
Oh, well, the exact number is, I'll move to reduce general basic reserves by $2,518,784. Second by Taylor. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. And that takes care of item, what's that?
For information, this does reduce our tax rate by 46.5 cents per dollar.
Quite a bit.
That's countywide level, so it affects both townships and the cities.
Yeah, and I appreciate the long-term plan we, as a board collectively took, rather than just sinking this into the budget and reducing the tax rate by an astronomical amount and then slingshotting way back up the next year and having to explain that. We've really been able to gradually decrease the rates due to things like this and tools we built up. And this still leaves, I forgot to mention, a historically high, at least last decade or so, 26.65% in general basic reserves. And there was a time where we were around 10.
So that's after the action?
Yes, after the action, we have 26.65% in general basic reserves. It's excellent. Certainly compared to our past. All right, that passed 4-0, correct? We already voted? Yes.
Can I ask what that does to our present position then, or is that something that you're going to have Dennis discuss?
There'll be in your board packet this week. But like I said, it did drop your tax rate 46.5%. I believe from the literature of the red and green sheet, that will reduce from 67.5 cents to take 36.5 off of that. So it's a dramatic change.
Right, but we had a gap.
Well, it'll leave you about $1 million gap yet.
Okay.
Before,
And we started off at 6.5 or 5.7, depending on how you calculated it. Is that correct?
We started at 6.28, but we had $1,015,140 in debt service to compensate some of that. So we're really down to 5.1 million. And now we're going to be down to probably about 1.3 total, 1.4.
And just for the good of the public to understand what we're talking about, if that's okay. We started off with about a $6.28 million gap that we would need to close. And right now, our present position to be able to keep a flat tax rate is how much more that this board would need to cut in order to make that happen. About $1.4 million. So we went from 6.28 to 1.4. Is that accurate? Thank you.
and this doesn't include improvement requests from the original 6.3. Okay. All right, great. Moving on to item C, interest on idle investments. I told the board earlier, I attended some conference or I think it was Professor Ernie Goss, and we were talking about interest rates and how, we might be able to look forward to a little bit of a silver lining on rates going up as far as the county being able to benefit from that. And so we have some good news for the budget. Do you want to have Treasurer Bertrand come and explain?
Good evening.
Good
Kate
evening.
Bertrand, Woodbury County Treasurer. Yes, Dennis and I have been talking quite a bit about the investment on, interest on investments. And yes, we have seen a significant increase in interest rates just from September. This time last year, we were looking at 0.5% interest, and now we're looking at 4.3% interest. So we've done a pretty deep dive in some of the calculations in terms of where we're at and what we have left over, what will be maturing for investments coming this spring. So we're seeing probably a 3.5% interest difference between last spring and this spring. So our interest right now, we're projecting out at about $500,000. Last year, we were down at like about $130,000 for our budget. I projected at $200,000 was my original projection when I was first going into it, but we were just starting to see some of those interest rates rise. Last September and August, we were seeing maybe 1% to 1.5%. It really came up in November, at the end of November. We bid some CDs the very beginning of December that I didn't actually get those bids in until mid-December, and we ended up at the 4%. So we actually increased our investments just from September to December by almost 2.5–3%. So that's a pretty good deal. The other thing that actually impacted for this year was when we brought the IPATE request in. that gave us another opportunity when we're actually doing our tax collections to be able to look at how we can do some short-term investments with them, meaning 10-day, 20-day investment terms. And that actually, this last September, brought us in an additional, for a 10-day investment, brought us an additional $30,000. So we're looking at being a little bit more aggressive on that come March, and definitely next September.
So you're forecasting on, is it just the county reserves, Dennis, or is it just the, property taxes as for every day they're in the accounts?
Invest money in, I think, daily money markets where it's safe.
Yep, so we do a couple of different things. We have some CDs that are long-terms, anywhere from 7 months to 2 years right now. We're looking at a little bit longer terms. The banks were actually very flush with cash right up until about October. So those interest rates weren't actually exceeding. We also have a local bank that we have a money market with that's actually tied to the 90-day T-bill. So that's been paying roughly 3 to 4% over the last couple of months. And we've been slowly moving money over there only because it's a very liquid account. So we can move it in and have it out in another day. So we actually have 2 of those kind of liquid accounts right now. The amount of money and some of the things I'm talking about is just the CDs, the CD investments we have, some T-bills that we have invested. T-bills were actually the highest rate last August, and we were looking at some diversification. And at that time, it was a 2.5% difference between what we could get at a CD versus a T-bill. So those are the other things we're taking a look at as well. Now, I don't know if you're looking for other cash reserves that Dennis might actually provide additional information.
Not at this moment.
I was just wondering how to explain, to people what exactly, which dollars are being invested, so to speak, because people, don't like to probably hear that county funds are being invested long-term for profit. It's just, but we have to put these funds somewhere in our reserves and elsewhere.
It's really the reserves we know we're gonna have on hand to keep county government functioning. Also, during tax collection time in March and April, there's a large sum of money that she can run through daily. We're talking 60, 70, 80 million dollars potentially from all the tax collections come in. They aren't required to send this out to the bodies till I think the 10th of the month. So there's time we can hold this money and draw some decent interest now.
Right.
Okay.
We have the same thing in motor vehicle. We bring in about $2.5 to $3 million every month that we hold and then we have to actually pay those out by the 10th of the month.
I think good way to explain it to the taxpayer is that we're able to gain interest to take some of that interest money, less the tax that we need from them. So toward that point, you budgeted originally back, probably you were required in December to submit a budget. If the position has changed now, what is the upshot in terms of, is there a difference in what we're realizing might be budgeted for revenue now?
All right, so when I budgeted in December, I was looking at $200,000. Now we're looking at $500,000, and some of that's because we have seen that much difference in interest rates.
That's great. So that's is that 300,000 that we could additionally budget revenue-wise?
Yes.
So we can bring
Yes.
down,
I'll
for
give you
those
a new
keeping
number
score
here
at
when
home,
she's done.
the 1.4 million would be 1.1 million.
We're even better than that. And I'll
Okay.
make a quick explanation when she's done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I like coming with the good news, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
Dennis?
Okay, quick explanation. If you go to your tally sheet, page 2, you'll notice that we're 4.713 million short on our general countywide, general basic, general sub township, which is rural basic. 4.7, but you gotta take off the 1,140,000, which is counterbalancing that, so we're down to 3.572085 million. We're taking 2,518,784, the county farm off, so we're down to 1,053,301. You take 300,000, we're down to 753,301 left to go to get to a
Give me the
flat
last
tax.
figure again, please.
Huh?
753,301?
Yep, to get to a flat tax.
Okay, so the 1.4 is 753,301 now.
Yes, after I actually do the calculations.
Okay.
Because you gotta take the 1,140,000 off because that's a reduced tax rate, so that counterbalances the other 3 rates. So we come out to a net flat tax.
So since this isn't actually reflected in the budget book, the motion is to receive with an increase of 300,000 to interest on investments
Correct.
within the county, which office?
General basic fund.
Within general
All the
basic
money goes
fund?
there. Yep.
300,000 exactly?
Yep.
Okay. Is that your motion?
Yes.
That's my second.
It's a good motion, good second by Ung and then by Taylor. Anyone else have any comments?
And
Yes.
that will reduce our tax rate 5.5 cents. Just to get an idea what we're doing. So with that combination, you're talking 52 cents per thousand just being reduced by those two motions.
Right. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item D, Board of Supervisors budget. First one is Communications Center.
On this budget here, we got preliminary numbers, so I'm not sure they're the same, so they may vary a little bit, but she's filling in for everybody's gone.
I'm it now, Dennis.
You're right.
Wendy Hess, Communications Center Director, so, gave Dennis our numbers. Just last week, we were notified of a revenue we're losing. We have some tower lease space on the North High Tower, that T-Mobile is, terminating that contract in March, so this is gonna change slightly. So overall, the communication center's proposed budget, is about 2.7 million. The county pays about 30% of that. So the county's, portion is about 651,000. It's gonna go up slightly, just by losing that revenue. So I guess I'm not sure, do I come back again, Dennis, or do you guys just?
No, you just tell us what the new number is, and
Okay.
that's what we plug in.
So I will have to work with, the city just to make sure we've got those numbers right. Obviously, our budget is, mostly employee compensation. That's a good percentage. Our total expenditures are going up, about 2% this year, and 1.9% of that is employee compensation, which most all our employees are covered under union contracts, so payroll and benefits, so.
So what was your new number that you checked with the city then?
I didn't subtract it, so I'll have to let you know for
Okay.
sure.
Is that going to affect our position, Dennis? Based on
Any
what you-
change will affect it, if it goes up or down. And she can probably give me the number.
I wanna say it's
sometime.
about
It'll be s-
$6,500, but I'll
Yeah.
make
And
sure exactly.
I don't want to say insignificant, but it is on the overall scheme. But we can get the right number as soon as she finds out. She can let me know and I'll pass it on.
Okay.
What if it was 6,500 for all four of us, or just 6,500 for
The
our share?
county's portion
Okay.
would be like 6,500, yeah.
I'd move to receive.
Second motion by Taylor. Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Number 2, Starcom program.
So Starcom is another one that's not adopted yet. The Starcom Executive Board meets tomorrow. I guess one question I have for the board, Supervisor DeWitt used to commonly represent the board at the Starcom Executive Committee. Do you know if anybody will be assuming that role and attending tomorrow?
Mr. Taylor will be there.
What time? This is
They
all new to me.
They meet at 10 o'clock tomorrow out at the TSI, out at the Communication Center building.
Mr. Taylor will be with you in spirit.
So the budget that I have developed or brought forth for Starcom is an estimated budget. It has to be accepted by all the parties at tomorrow's executive meeting. Based upon what I did, several things have decreased slightly. I basically just looked at some trends from the last several years. A few things increased based upon a tower project we need to do. Radio maintenance increased slightly based upon a maintenance contract. I do plan on addressing the Starcom board. I'm not sure if you know, but Starcom has a mobile communications bus. It's a big RV that was purchased with FEMA dollars several years ago. It has almost never been used. We're paying insurance on it. It's outfitted with expensive radio equipment, and it sits in the Sioux City Fire Training facility. It doesn't have a 911 phone system anymore. The state at one point funded that, but the technology is outdated, so that was removed. So I am going to address the Starcom board about possibly liquidating that piece of equipment. It's just not being used. It was great when we got it. You know, FEMA was gonna give all this money to somebody, so we got this great tool. We used it when RAGBRAI started in Sergeant Bluff, not this last time, but like 15, 20 years ago. And since then, it's really been sitting. So my goal is to reduce the Starcom budget tomorrow during their discussions, probably around $15,000. That's basically what we're paying for maintenance on that bus every year. So we will see still trying to get answers from FEMA grant people on how we liquidate that. I believe Woodbury County owns it. I don't know if you guys even remember when that was. Michelle was probably worked with me back then, but so I'm still trying to get answers on the procedure for liquidating it, and I suspect that maybe another public agency locally might be interested in taking it over, but then moves it to their budget, not Starcom. So we'll see what transpires tomorrow. For right now, those maintenance, that insurance and maintenance and upkeep is still in the budget for what the numbers you have right now. So, any questions about Starcom?
Kind of like that movie Stripes there, you get rid of the RV.
The other thing is the state has a piece of equipment that we could use in the event that we had a large-scale incident and needed a radio communications vehicle. So the state has the resources also, so we don't need to maintain it here locally. So.
Don't we have other mobile
The sheriff's
RVs?
department has a vehicle also, so, and they kind of do use theirs when they have things going on, so.
And it's kind of overkill if we got 2 or 3 of
It
them.
is.
I think we have 3 of them between the county, the city, and.
So I think the Sioux City Police Department, I think they would possibly be interested in getting rid of their old one and maybe taking on the Winnebago. So, anything else? I'll get you exact numbers, Dennis.
Once she gets enough final, we'll also plug in the final number and adjust the overall.
Are
Do
you
we-
talking on Starcom or on? Both of them, okay.
Starcom and.
So you should just receive this as it is now, and you're gonna get us adjusted now. All right, I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Number 3, Youth Guidance Services.
43, and that number there, I did keep it the same. Currently, we're at 42,768, and that's a variable there because that's court order placement of children. So I'd like to leave it the same.
Move to receive.
Second.
Second by Raddick. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Item E is Emergency Management. This is out of Rural Basic.
Emergency management, that should be general stuff. I apologize.
Oh.
Should be- I have it wrong here.
Is that under emergency services tab, or is that under our tab?
They have their own board, sets of budget, Mike's the director now.
Okay.
So it's 38 emergency services / management?
It's, okay, is it 38 in our budget, under Board of Supervisors?
Under supervisor page 38, and originally we put in 149,601. I don't know if that's the same, or it's about increasing cash reserve, but as far as Scott and Mike, they forego that, there's enough cash here, so we do that.
Yeah, it was discussed that we will likely not continue to increase that. So tomorrow at our Emergency Management Commission, we're gonna ask for the adoption of the budget, which will increase the budget by $2,078 in total from last year.
So we can reduce by about almost.
So my final number from the county is gonna be $160,357. That includes the 10,000. It hasn't been adopted yet, but if we decrease it, yes.
Okay, so with the decrease, what would it be then?
You're better at numbers than I am.
What was your number there? 163.57?
160,357.
57, okay, so then with that decrease that you already said they wouldn't do, you come down to 150,357, which is a slight increase over what I got in the budget.
How much of an increase?
That's 700.
800, about $700 increase,
Just for the minutes, you know.
yes. Well, let's get the exact number.
Well, he's looking that up. How are the reserves looking as a percentage and just as a dollar amount?
The reserves are looking good. I believe we have about 96,000 in there at this time for carryover.
I'd move to receive with an increase of $756.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. What percentage is that?
Dennis, do you know what percentage that is?
Increase?
No, the reserves, sorry.
Oh, I don't have the total, but I have the total budget.
I'm just big picture wondering how it's been fluctuating.
You have your total budget?
In my total budget? I would have to run the whole numbers.
Okay.
Pretty substantial. If they got nine, I think at the end of the year, then we have 87,000 June 30th, 22. So if you tell me what his expenditures were, I can tell you exactly what his reserve is.
Okay.
It's pretty high.
There's gonna be carryover too, so that will add to it.
Could you restate the motion, please?
Move to receive with $756 increase.
Second by me.
Second by Radig.
Also known as me or Radig. Any other discussion?
There was a question. I know Mr. Rocky DeWitt was the representative on our Emergency Management Commission and Local Emergency Planning Commission. If you guys decided on who will take his place, excellent, thank you.
As per the liaison assignments, Mr. Taylor, and the alternates, Mr. Radig. Because I think there's a form that the alternate needs to complete, as far as I remember, when I was the alternate for DeWitt.
I will
There
double
was-
check that, yes.
So they're authorized to act on the county or something like that. It was unique to the commission.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Item F is Community and Economic Development.
Okay, on this one here, just for information, we did leave the director in there with a 3% increase, I believe. So, board has to think about what they would like to do with this position, is food or not food. Fact is, we do use local option sales tax to fund this fully. So I wait till the end of the year, see how much they've spent, then I move the money over. So if it's unspent, like it will be this year, the money will stay in the local option sales tax. We only move what's been spent.
Quick question. Did you already apply local option sales tax to this budget?
Yes.
So it's already reflected that we would, it's already assumed we would use local option to fund this, okay.
$301,001, which includes the director and all of that.
What was
Okay.
that number?
$301,000.
Now, on our tab here, you have it as rural basic, but,
It's paid out of rural basic, funded by local option,
okay.
and it's already been plugged in all our numbers.
Mr. Priestley?
I would just have to defer to Dennis basically on this, kind of in the last year or so. I know they got the budget done last year is when we lost the director, and I've just been operating in my role as coordinator. So.
Okay. So Dennis, you've been, so you put this budget together?
Yeah, Dan oversees it somewhat, but basically, there's no increase. It's just the same numbers.
Can we look at some items, just because I know we probably won't deep dive as as much, but for example, on page 3, you've got $1,000 budgeted for food, and it says event, food and beverage, client partner meetings. I noticed nothing's been expended this year at all. Is that an item that we can eliminate?
I guess from my perspective on the zoning side, I would see that much more as an economic development function more so as.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of gas and oil, do you have a vehicle that is necessary for that? I noticed another 0, but we have $1,250, and then 2 years prior, it was a lot under 500 and under 260.
We do not have a county vehicle anymore, I believe, and he is using mileage.
Okay. Is that mileage accounted for somewhere in this budget?
Yeah, page 4.
Okay, so it seems like we could eliminate that $1,250.
You could almost eliminate it, move it over to mileage. If you look at mileage on page 4, you know, at almost 1,000 spent it already. We only got 1,045 budgeted, so really, if you move the gas and oil over to that line, would be about a quarter.
Okay, can you just do that, Dennis?
We don't need a motion.
Right, that's why I'm asking if you could just do it. Yep. How about stationery? You've spent $42 and we got 1,000 budgeted. Is that something that, or is that an economic development thing?
I would say much more from that perspective, yeah.
Okay, appreciate it.
But on the memberships, we got some like professional developers, that's.
Yeah, though, that would be kind of an important factor. I don't know where it'd fit, but with, like, when we have the Iowa State training for like zoning commission, board of adjustment, or other types of training opportunities that are available.
Could you review which membership dues we're gonna need to keep?
Basically, probably the American Planning Association would be the big one, but other than that, those other factors are probably more so
There's
economic.
COZO, that sounds like. county
COZO would
zoning.
be one, those two, COZO and APA.
So it's the CVN and IEDC, not really needed.
No.
I don't even know what was CVN?
I'd have to think for.
I remember the other two.
Those were not mine.
I would suggest you leave them in there until you make a determination if you're gonna hire a director, because if the director is hired, you're gonna need those items there.
Yeah, but that's it.
But it doesn't affect taxes any way you go.
What about
Well,
maintenance?
Mr. Taylor had a question, I think.
I guess one other one, and then I'll get off my thing here, but meal expenses, we're averaging $17 over the last 3 years. We got 600. You're not eating on the job, are you? Okay. So I think there's $2,600 that we could move, receive unless,
Taken out of context, you're not eating on the job.
well,
could be,
you know.
we are strict. No lunch breaks for you.
The maintenance contracts, so 4,000, is that this copier maintenance lease agreement? That's an,
I think that would be, again, outside of my area.
all right.
It'd be, they must have a machine up there, they got a copier
Oh, the
agreement.
copy, okay, then.
So
I'll
it
have to
costs
say
$4,000 to maintain it?
$4,000?
And that's something we do use quite a bit. We need it for
yeah.
the processing of packets and.
It's not up to 4,000 over the years, but
Right.
2,500 is, that's, copiers cost.
Well, right, but I mean, can that be lowered down to 3,000? If we're only at the last 2 years at 2,507, 2,585, I mean, I know it's not gonna, I'm just,
So are we leasing the copier?
that's what
I believe so.
How much is a copier?
I
Least
don't, I
2,500.
apologize, I don't have that figure.
At least 2,500.
It's a
That's
pretty common practice to lease copiers because the sheer amount of maintenance involved in a copier. You could be buying a new copier every month.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm for leasing. We do that at the church every. It's fine. I'm just saying, is it 4,000 the true amount, or can we drop it or leave it? I don't know. I'm just saying.
Oh, it's listed as maintenance contracts. I don't know if there's other contracts it was intended to pay for other than the copier.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It would be good to know that in past boards and things I've been involved in, you know, you have lease agreements on copiers, and your copy might be like 10 or 20 years old. As long as you're still using it, you know, they'll keep leasing it to you for the same rate. At some point, you could either offer to buy out of that lease and just buy the copier outright, which, you know, a lot of those places will do, or you can suggest, hey, I want a newer copier. This thing's like 14 years old. So, you know, to any departments that have them.
It looks like we haven't spent over $3,000 in that, so I'm, to Mr. Bittinger's point, you could probably reduce it by
Let's
1,000.
reduce it by, yeah. Reduce it by 1,000.
So,
If we don't,
I would move to receive minus 3,600.
You want to specify what line items now?
Sure. So 1,000 on the maintenance contracts,
1,000 on maintenance, okay.
600 on meals.
Okay. You're eliminating all of it?
Yeah. Dan hasn't spent $1 on food this year.
That'd usually be the other side of the office that spend
Yeah,
that.
but
He
there's,
wouldn't spend it.
I don't want to budget for somebody that we don't have.
Now, you aren't going to any schools or anything, like ISAC or anything?
Probably will intend on to in the future. It was kind of a year of adjustment and transition without the director and
But
everything.
he's still got $2,000 and he spent 15 on travel expenses. I think we could include it in that.
Okay, because
Just
we do
seems
break
like-
travel and meals down, though.
What's that?
We break travel expenses and
Yeah,
meals
but you spent
down.
$15 this year, 175 the previous, and a zero, and you got 2,000. I'm sure you can find a lot of food
Okay,
there.
okay.
And then, well, I was saying 2,000 on travel expenses, because Dan said that's on the other side of the house, and you still have 1,200 for School of Instruction. Does that sound fair? I mean, I seriously don't want to short you if you're like, I can't go to ISAC now, or I can't do what I need to do for your side of the house. I do not want to.
Yeah, I fully understand, and kind of the way the office has been kind of designed for the last 4 or so years, pretty much the budgetary stuff was fully under the director, so it's kind of a awakening to me, kind of at this point on getting closer to the numbers. So in terms of what is ever available, I'll make the most of it on what's needed, but I'm just one of those that just use what is needed, of course.
Yeah.
Are these local option dollars, do they go back into lost if they're not spent?
Yes.
So this isn't
I
going
wait
back
till
to
the end of the
reserves?
year to actually transfer the money, when I know their actual
Okay.
expenses then transferred.
So that's, I mean,
It's a mood issue.
that's
kinda.
one of the reasons why it may be a little over compared to other budgets is the excess just returns right back to where we're funding it from.
Yes,
And it's not tax dollars, property tax dollars, so.
no property tax dollars involved. So you still want to do the 2,000 or? Okay.
No, 20,
So that makes
3,600.
this 3,600, okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Radig. We didn't address the director question. Are we budgeting for a ghost for the next year, or are we going to try and hire somebody?
So.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I have noticed other counties in the state of Iowa have done away with this position. And I think part of it is very rarely can you justify the expense with the actual growth you're gonna get. You have to land, you know, I don't know, I can't remember what the number was. It was like 3.5 million worth of development or 30 million worth of development every year. It's a large number to justify the salary. So most counties have done away with the position, and I hate to say it, but I think we might consider following suit. I think it was in vogue 10 years ago to add them, or 15 years ago.
So that should be reflected in the number in the motion, correct? If we're not
Correct.
going to be funding that.
We would delete the 94,379 plus family, plus FICA, IPERS, plus LTD, dental and life. And we'll give you a number next week. Yeah, if you can. So with that said, that'll just decrease our transfer over. We do make it at the end of the year. This year we'll have more money left over in local option because we won't transfer the whole amount. Next year it'll decrease it by about 125,000. So that'll just give us more funds and local option available.
So while Michelle's figuring that out, that'll take you a couple minutes, I'm sure, Michelle. Could we reduce $6,308 in reserves due to the 2 months of the supervisor vacancy?
Where we,
Because we're not paying a fifth supervisor for 2 months.
what does this have to do with?
It's just on a different topic while she's
Oh,
figuring that
okay.
out.
I just put it back in reserves. It's not that big a dollar amount. I get your point that we aren't spending it, but same way with the county attorney's office where we got 400,000, they may only spend 200, that'll all go back in reserves for future use.
We were talking about competitiveness. We could use it to incentivize a challenger for me since I famously ran unopposed.
It's true.
I didn't know you were unopposed.
You didn't?
Also-
Oh,
Also, down the road, you may want to consider an economic development director in 3 or 4 years when you get this new interchange built. So you got somebody going out there trying to find businesses to locate, but that's 3 or 4 years down the road.
well, we'll give Dan a raise and
There you go.
tackle it that way.
/11.
The vacant position is budgeted for $119,006, 119,006.
I would make a motion. No, sorry.
There's a motion here.
I would amend my motion to 122,606.
Can you amend it again? Add another 310, or 3,110 in these membership dues, CVN, IADC, and PDI.
If Dan agrees.
Yeah.
You're good with all those?
Yeah.
You don't need it?
As long as we have the COZO and APA, that'd be good.
So you had 3,600 plus 3,110.
125,716 is what I get.
Okay, there's your new motion.
So are you seconding the amendment?
I am seconding
It's
125,000.
just unanimous consent.
Yeah.
Give me an amount.
125,716. 125,716.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, we'll have in excess of 450,000 plus and lost after this.
Yeah. Yeah, with the lost already, and I'm gonna give you
Yeah.
updated sheets there for 24 what we have, so you can just add that on the bottom line.
Okay.
I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole, but the IJR, that's something the local option sales tax could help with, right? I know it's going to be a pittance, but
IJR basically is pretty much all done. We
That's
still
20
got some bills out there and some money coming back in.
the IJR steady is.
The what?
The IJR steady,
It's all paid for.
right, but I'm talking about the actual interchange itself. I know
Well,
that'll be
interchange
mostly through
itself To
TIF.
build it,
Yeah.
okay, that'll be down the road yet. We're still working on that. That'll be 3 or 4 years down the
But
road.
local option sales tax could be something that we could,
Well, it could be, but our idea is use TIF.
all right, okay.
Well, in the future, we could maybe, contract with another agency like City Sioux City or the Chamber or somebody
Pursue an initiative too.
to do some kind of marketing or economic development on a per annum basis rather than having the staff position we're funding indefinitely.
Here, here.
So did you amend the motion include the dues too? And how much was that?
Yeah, I think Pat's got it all.
Yep, it was the last number stated.
125,716.
Hearing no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Item G, County Supervisor's budget includes 1, Hard Rock gaming fees.
Okay, just to give you a recap, Hard Rock first here. Here's the updated 24. I put it all on one sheet here so you can all look at it here. And they all have, the majority of them all have a report, if you want to look at those. But here's pretty much what we're doing here so far that we plugged in. We plugged in 292,655 for economic development. That will change. Wait, I'm sorry. Let me get the gaming here. We plugged in, there's only 2 things right now we have obligated, and that's the Meals on Wheels. They asked for the same, and CERT's asked for the same. So with a carryover funds we have, and that changes every month because sometimes we get more money than we anticipated from gaming revenues. We still got 6 months left to go. So that number could be a little higher, but right now, with the funds on hand to carry over, I'm estimating, and what we're gonna have left over after we do our allocations here, we'll have 980,000 left over.
So I would like to make a motion that we expend $535,000 of gaming revenue in order to pay for equipment. $300,000 for sheriff's cars, $130,000 for conservation, and $105,000 for building services. That will still leave us approximately $200,000 of new gaming revenue, but it will also bring us down to within $250,000 of our target. So again, it would be $535,000 to fund equipment light items for sheriff's cars, conservation, and building services. If anybody would second.
Second. Dennis, do you have those numbers, the line items understood at least?
Find it real quick here. Okay, the line items would be,
I mean, do you know what they are for the
Yes,
purposes of the
yes,
minutes?
yep.
Okay, so these are vehicles and,
yeah, sheriff's 300,000, conservation's 130,000, and 105,000 is building service for the new facility, equipment needed,
okay, one-time costs.
one-time costs. Now, some of it isn't, like conservation will be coming back every year, and the sheriff's cars will be coming back every year.
Right, but I mean, for building services, those are
That's
one-time
one-time.
setup costs. Okay.
Yeah. The other two are ongoing costs, we're gonna elect to use gaming.
All right, I seconded the motion by Taylor. I don't think we'll need to come back to this fund for budget purposes, but if we do, it's still there. We still have 26.65% in reserves as well. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
Matthew?
Yes.
Do you want to pass allocation for Meals on Wheels and also for certs on separate motions?
So moved on Meals on Wheels.
Second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
So moved for certs.
Second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. For the good of the public, these leverage state or federal funding, correct?
Yes.
But for our contribution, we would not receive more state or federal funds, because it is not our practice to fund nonprofits otherwise.
Correct.
Okay.
Here's the next one here. Local option updated for 24. It's easier to put on my sheet here.
Are you moving on to the next? Do we still have item C, the request from Centers Against Abuse and Sexual Assault?
Oh, yes. I did include that in because they ask every year for that, and the board's denied it. But seeming they asked, I had to put it in. It is not included in our numbers, because history shows we do not approve it. But I had to bring it before you.
Where is the amount and where is the?
They're requesting 5,000. This has been.
Page 53,
This has been on the
55.
agenda like the last 3 budget years, and they've asked around, I think it was 5,000 almost every time, and this was part of our, we weren't gonna add any nonprofits that, for the county policy that we were having, it didn't leverage any other funds or anything, so.
Right. In fact, I wonder if it might be helpful for everyone involved if you just explain that to anyone that's a nonprofit, especially if it doesn't leverage federal or state funds, and just simply don't include it in the budget book.
Okay. That's
If
fine.
they want to come as a separate agenda item to request, that's certainly, but I don't think that continually denying for the same reason is, why go through that?
I guess make sure they got the point so they don't come back. And they're the only one so far, over the last 2-3 years.
Well, whether they're denied by a vote or denied at your door, I mean, it's not the county's practice anymore to fund
Okay.
nonprofits and pick winners and losers, despite how deserving they may be.
So we really don't need a motion on this. Or do you think we do?
No, there's no motion necessary if we're
Okay.
not gonna do any action for changing anything.
Oh, we get a
Does the board, should we move to deny, or should we just skip it? Pat?
Should move to deny because it's on the agenda.
I'll move to deny.
Second.
Second by Radig. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Okay, Dennis, local
Okay.
option.
Yep, we go to local option, it starts on page 66, runs through 85. If you want to look at the individual departments, but we can actually go through this on the sheet I just handed out. Transfers, economic development, 292, that will be dropping. So our balance carryover will increase from what I have up here. Also, it'll increase what we have unobligated at the bottom. So I'll make adjustments and bring that to you next week, so you have actual numbers. Soil conservation, we always fund that out of local option sales tax. We've done that for several years now. Okay, the next one's the Ag Center. This is payment number 6 of 10. We have 4 more after this. That's $150,000 a year. Student Initiative, that's $25,000, same allocations last year. And then this case here, this could be considered possibly, they could help us if we don't have an economic development director, and help Dan possibly also. So that's $25,000 there. That has been funded previously several years. Western Iowa Tourism, that was, you take the ARPA off, that's $500. They do have a section back here, requesting that money. And ARPA, we aren't using ARPA this year. We use it this current year, but we aren't gonna use it next year so far. We don't need to really. County Fair, they're $32,000. That's the same amount that they had last year. Simcoe memberships, I put that at 0. Now, that's a question mark there because that was $7,279. That's where we have in the past, Dave always came down, our former director, and had you pay part of the dues for all the towns. And we could put that back in at $72.79, or we can leave it out if you want to consider paying all their Simcoe dues, half their dues.
I'm fine with doing it.
Doing it?
Yeah,
Do the dues? So I can add the 72, so I need a motion to add 72.79 for a portion of the rural cities Simcoe dues to
So moved.
qualify.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Is this as part of the acceptance of all of these transfers?
Yes.
That was 72.79?
Yep. And then Simcoe Improvement Regional Housing, that every year, that leverages federal money for housing, that's $10,235. And then Iowa West Coast, that is that's $2,500, same as last year.
Did the county fair want to send a representative to the budget process, as they sometimes have?
They didn't really say anything. I don't know if I think Heather contacted them, but the same amount, so they were happy when they're getting the $32,000.
Okay. I just want to make sure they're aware it was, scheduled for today, and
And when you approve these today, we'll notify each one they did get their funding for next year.
Okay. Any other comments? So on the motion to receive plus allocation of $7,279 from local option, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
So do we need all of these, or we're good?
Pat, do they need to go individually, or can they do them all lump here?
Oh, if you did it all at once, I can put it together that way.
Okay.
So then my running total is, we went from $6.28 million to $226,336 is the gap, about $250,000 left.
Oh, you only got $218,301 to go.
Okay, you added back in the 72.79 and
Didn't affect tax asking.
What was that, 218?
$218,301 to get
with
to
a
a flat tax.
26.65% reserve. I think that's pretty darn good.
When do we consider improvement requests?
I have those scheduled for Tell you here in a minute. January 31st, we have medical examiner on that day and improvement requests.
Was that for the morgue?
Yes.
And we ought to have some discussions on that.
Next week for budget, what do we have?
Next week for budget would be the 7th. We have WIC upstairs and the county attorney. We're getting down to where there isn't a whole lot left, 'cause we whacked a lot on the 3rd and the 5th.
Could we move improvement requests or could we move improvement requests up? Does the board want to do that, or do we want to wait until the 31st?
I'd rather wait till the 31st.
Okay. Yes.
Can you work with, and I can say this offline, can you work with the county attorney too on putting together, it'd be helpful for us to know, here's your total financial package of,
For next week?
right,
Or
if he's
for-
coming next week,
Yes.
just like, this is what we need money-wise.
From ARPA, from unused
Yeah, and
funds,
other- yep.
and how it affects next year also.
Yeah, and with Michelle,
Yeah.
that would be really helpful.
Yep,
Okay.
plan on it.
All right, unless anyone else has anything for the good of the order,